Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff. This week on the show, we are continuing our Batman on Film series, which we began last month with Batman from 1966 starring Adam West and Burt Ward. The point of this series is that we are going through all of the theatrical Batman films in order, sort of in preparation for the new Matt Reeves Batman movie that we will get at some indeterminate time in the future because of COVID, but also because I think Batman is such an interesting, fraught character at this moment in time that we've wanted to go through it. So we are continuing today as part 2, where we are jumping into what is essentially the birth of the modern superhero movie, and that is Batman 1989, directed by Tim Burton, starring Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. And it's an interesting film. I had not seen it in a number of years.
Yeah, I had not seen it. I think high school was the last time I watched it. Because I had the impression that I had seen it more recently than I really thought about it. There's no way I watched it any time more recently than high school. Yeah. I think the last time I watched this movie was probably around the time we started doing this podcast forever ago.
I believe the last time I saw this movie was whenever I got the Blu-ray of it, and this was an early Blu-ray, so probably like early high school or like early college maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a while, and it's an interesting film. I have complicated feelings on it.
So do I. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it is a movie even if you just hated all of it, you can't dismiss it because its impact is so big.
Yeah, it has tremendous impact. It's got like incredibly impressive production design.
Yeah.
A lot of the storytelling maybe is not as interesting as the set design was.
I'll put it this way. My short take on this movie is that I think it is a really incredible piece of filmmaking with a pretty rough script.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So, I would agree with that.
And then we'll argue about Jack Nicholson. We'll see. All right. But we will also today, at the end of the show, we're going to save this for the end because I know it is... this is one I genuinely don't want to spoil for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. So if you have not seen the new episode of The Mandalorian, we will be reviewing that at the end of today's show. So when we're done with the Batman discussion, if you haven't watched Mandalorian yet, you can turn this off, go to Disney Plus, watch that. You should, because holy fuck.
It is fucking amazing. It is such a good episode. Oh my God.
It is. I said it is one of the best Star Wars things ever, and you liked that tweet, so I assume you agree.
Yeah, no, it is. It is a phenomenal episode of television, especially if you are a big fan of the Mandalorian show and Dave Filoni's other work, because he wrote and directed this episode. It is really, really amazing.
Yes, so we will be talking about all of that on today's show. I should also note that if things sound a little different, that's because we are back in person.
Yes.
I'm actually looking at you, Sean, not through a computer screen, because I am back in Colorado, staying with my parents for a little while, so it's Thanksgiving. How was your Thanksgiving, Sean?
It was nice. It was quiet because we didn't have anybody else come in.
Yep.
So it was just like staying at home. This has been a nice week off. That now we're recording this basically on my last week my last day before I go back to work tomorrow. And I'm like, oh fuck, I have to go back to work tomorrow.
I'm sorry, Sean.
Yeah.
Christmas break's not too far away.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's that weird thing of the way that fall semester is structured in American school, where you go almost the entire semester without a break, and then you get an entire week off, and then you go to school for 2 to 3 weeks, and then you get 2 to 3 weeks off, or a month if you're in college.
Yeah, I've got 2 weeks left of classes to teach, and then they're doing finals, and I'll be grading their finals, and that's all I've got left. And then all of my work is kind of independent study stuff, so I'm kind of making my own schedule. But it's a wild time of the year. Before we jump into Batman, I wondered if we wanted to touch on any stuff. I have finished Demon's Souls.
I also finished Demon's Souls, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second.
So I finished that a week ago. I actually ended up, I think because of your car trip, I noticed on your tweets, I ended up finishing it a day earlier than you, which was interesting.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I had to. It was kind of funny. Before I left on my car trip, the night before, I got through all of the archdemons. So I had done all 4 archdemons, and then all I had left was the final stages of Boletaria.
Yeah.
But then I had to get in the car, and I didn't play it for... I actually did my drive in one full day. I was in the car for 13 and a half hours alone.
Fuck.
That was... You see the face of God, and it's not pretty when you do that. But anyway, I also, at night, Colorado, when you come into Colorado, there's no lights. and I missed the interchange to get onto 76, so I wound up going through Wyoming a little bit. It wasn't much of a detour. It was only about 40 extra miles. But like it was, I noticed I had made the mistake when I saw the sign "Welcome to Wyoming," and that is at 10 p.m. at night. That is a scary thing to see.
Yeah, I mean, spending any time in Wyoming sucks a little bit out of your soul, but especially when you're not even trying to be in Wyoming.
I know, and it was late. I couldn't go buy fireworks. The only reason to go to Wyoming.
Yeah, that is very funny.
Yes. All right. And I'd say, maybe we're going to insult some listeners from Wyoming, but you have to have internet to download a podcast. So come on.
Yeah, I mean, the chances of this podcast having one of the 5 people that live in Wyoming listen to it, it's just exceedingly small.
Yeah. Anyway.
We can make fun of Wyoming because we're from Colorado.
Yes.
So if you're from anywhere else in the country, you can't do it, but we can.
So I was traveling Monday, and then I got in Monday night, and then Tuesday, I don't think I played any Demon's Souls I don't think I got back to it until Wednesday, and then I just finished the whole thing in one sitting. Because Demon's Souls, I will say, never gets to the level of being, I think, particularly tough in like a Dark Souls or Sekiro way to me.
No.
There's one boss, the Man-Eater, that took me some thinking and doing. But man, I love that game. It's so good.
Yeah, it is phenomenal. It is. I'm with you that it is not, I think, ever get particularly hard. Like, I had forgotten that, I mean, almost, with the exception of the actual last boss of the game in Boletaria, almost all of the archdemons are like gimmick bosses.
Yes.
Which is fine because they are like really fucking cool, especially with the visual boost and everything that you get with the remake. But it definitely, you get the sense of like, oh yeah, right, like this is kind of them feeling out how to do this game, because like all said and done, there's only like 5 or 6 bosses that are like proper boss fights in that game. There's a significant number, maybe like half of them are basically gimmick fights.
Yeah, and I think some of the gimmick fights are really good. Like, I love the one in World 4, Shrine of Storms.
Yeah.
That is the coolest fucking thing in the world.
Yeah, it is a very spectacular. That was the one we talked about last time on the podcast that you had done and I had not yet done in the remake. And I was very excited to see it because I knew what that boss fight was, and it 100% lived up to my expectations and exceeded them in terms of what they pulled out for like the spectacle of that fight.
I also love the one in World 5 where you have there's this like woman who's at the end of this
Maiden
long
Estrella.
tunnel, the Maiden Estrella, and you don't have to fight her. You have to fight her like a guardian.
Garland Vinland. Yeah.
That one's so cool. I like, from a story narrative aesthetic perspective, that's one of my favorite boss fights. I also killed Garland Vinland in 2 hits because I had the Dozer axe, and he went down to that fast.
Oh, I had my lethal secret dagger, and I parried him and just slit his throat. And I was like, I feel bad for you, Garland, because the Maiden Estrella fight I think is the most memorable. Like, I never got to that point when I played the game originally, but when I watched it, a like let's play of it, that was the one that stood out to me as this is like where you can feel Miyazaki building up to the kind of thing that you'd get a similar quality, I think, in some of like the Dark Souls, like Artorias boss fight and his wolf that you fight in the main game, and some of those where they blend the like emotional storytelling content that is very obviously like subtle and kind of cryptic in these games, but is definitely there, and then when it hits this kind of like climax or peak in some of these big boss fights, there's a really great example of it in Dark Souls 3. Like when they do that, that's when these games are like the most impressive to me.
Yeah, and I think the big thing that Demon's Souls is missing there, and that you get in later games, is mixing kind of the gimmick things with actual challenge.
Yeah.
Because you just mentioned like several very hard bosses in Dark Souls, like the Wolf and Knight Artorias and stuff like that. And those definitely have like a big narrative aesthetic hook to them, but they are also big challenging boss fights. Like, I feel like the most like straight up Dark Souls style challenge fight in this game that isn't just bullshit, because I think the Man-Eater is kind of just bullshit.
Yeah, that boss fight, like, just like they didn't touch up the AI in this game, and that's one where they probably just should have with that Man-Eater fight, because I feel like that character does not behave like properly, and it kind of glitches out in weird ways.
Yeah, I mean, I wound up beating him just by running to one end of the stage, firing a shit ton of arrows, running back, and then the other one would never notice me because I had the thief ring on. There's just a lot of ways to cheese it. But I feel like it's the old king at the end of the game. That one is a proper, like, it's not too tough if you've played several of these games and you know what to look for in, like, the boss patterns and stuff. But it is just you versus a dude. He's got some really big, powerful attacks, and it's like you learning to read him and fight. And it feels like a very rough draft of something like you get in Sekiro, I feel like.
Yeah, that was the exact thought that I had, that because he is very similar conceptually, I think, in terms of his moveset to the last boss in Sekiro. but it is like, they take that, if Old King Allen is like a 3, the last boss in Sekiro is an 11.
Right.
Similar concept of like type of enemy, type of strategy you have to use in terms of distancing and stuff, and like the kind of moveset he has of balancing ranged attacks with close range attacks and closing the distance and all that. But they just learned so much over the course of like 10 plus years by the time you get to Sekiro to like really evolve what those kinds of fights are in terms of the game mechanics.
Yeah, and yet I really love that Blue Point didn't change these things underneath, because it is so cool to go back to the original and see some of the rough edges and see like where it evolved from, because this is one of the most significant lines of games now in the history of gaming.
Yeah,
and seeing that history and seeing it preserved in such beautiful quality in the Blue Point remake is a really cool way to get perspective on it. Like, it makes you appreciate the other games even more. But I also think it makes me appreciate what's unique about Demon's Souls, because it has unique qualities that the other games don't have. We said this last time, I really do wind up loving the kind of archstone structure and the way they do it. It's not what I would want every game to be. I wouldn't trade a Dark Souls in for it, but I'm really glad it is this alternate thing that I can go back and revisit. And even as soon as I finished, I wound up doing at least a little bit of New Game Plus, mainly because I realized I had an Uchigatana, and you were talking up the Uchigatana, so I went and used that, and that is a fun weapon.
It is very fun, yeah.
New Game Plus is no fucking joke either. I didn't, because I've never tried that in Dark Souls. Mm-hmm. And it really, like, they ramp up the difficulty on the enemies, like, back up to, like, where you are. So you go back through like the early stage of Boletaria, and those skeletons can kill you again. Mm-hmm. So it's fun.
Yeah, that was one of those things, because it had been Dark Souls 3 came out like 2016, so it's been a while since I played a like Dark Souls game.
Yeah.
So like in my memory, it's like, with Sekiro, you get a little bit more powerful over the course of playing that game, but not that much. And that was one of the things playing Demon's Souls. I was like, oh, right, when I went back to the original area to farm some, like, grass or whatever, I think I went back there because I was just like, I got a new weapon that I wanted to see what his backstab and, like, parry animations were, and I missed my parry and got hit, and I couldn't even see the amount of damage it did on my characters. I'm like, oh, right, because I've got, like, a shit ton of endurance, and I've got, like, good armor on, and I'm like, oh, right, these games are, like, RPGs. Like, you do level up, like, way out-level enemies and stuff in that game.
Feel every level when you put a point in. You then feel it. Like if you put a point into stamina, you can do a few more hits if you've got a light weapon. Yeah,
I think that's one of those things that like the narrative that we sometimes create around these games of how hard they are misses the fact that it's like no, like you can absolutely out level shit in this game.
It's why they don't need an easy mode. There's so many ways to like. And that's part of the fun, is that if you hit a wall, you go figure out how to get around the wall, and there are a million tools at your disposal. You can make your own easy mode. Yeah. But yeah, in Sekiro, you get a little extra health and things like that, but Sekiro, the main currency is knowledge. It's knowledge of how to play the game.
Yeah.
And so if you go back and you're killing enemies left and right in Sekiro, it's because you've gotten good at it, not because you've poured a ton of points into something, right?
Yeah.
And that's a little different than Demon's Souls, where yes, you can, if you want, you can do what I did, and if you just want to wear some heavy armor, you can go spend half an hour shooting the Grim Reaper dude in World 4, and you get a shit ton of souls, and then you give your endurance up to 40, and then you can have whatever the fuck you want.
Yep.
Well, not the really heavy stuff. I'd have to get my endurance quite a bit higher for some of that stuff, because there is some heavy-ass armor in this game. But yeah. Although I also feel like Demon's Souls, I would have fun maybe even trying a heavy build in this, because I feel like it would be kind of doable for a lot of this stuff. Once you, maybe not your first time through, but once you know it.
Yeah, it definitely feels like because the bosses aren't as hard, you don't... Like I've never really understood how people can play through the Dark Souls games without having the fastest roll.
Exactly.
Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm sure that, obviously lots of people do it. Yeah. But, I'm with you that when I got to the end of Demon's Souls, I'm like, I actually think that would be, a fun way to play the game.
Yeah.
And, a very doable, interesting way to play it.
Right.
In a way that, I have no interest in playing Dark Souls without, the fastest roll.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, it's cool. I don't think we have a ton more to say about Demon's Souls, but
it's just a great game. If you have a PS5, if you're lucky enough to have one, you should be playing this game.
Yeah. Oh, the ending. I also love the ending.
Oh, yes. It's got one of the best endings of any of these games. Because I think one thing about Demon's Souls I had forgotten is that it is, it's like a 25, 30-hour long game. It's actually about, when I looked down how long to beat, because I was curious, I'm like, man, I got through this pretty quick. This version is 5 hours shorter on average on how long to beat.
Load times.
Just load times. That's literally just load times. And I was like, that seems crazy. And then I thought about it. It's well, this game loads in 5 seconds. it used to load in like a minute and 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So if you add on a minute, like 60 loads, that's an hour.
Yep.
It's like,
and you do way more than that many loads in a playthrough.
Yeah, because every time you die, you do a load. Every time you have to teleport, you do a load. I mean, every time you beat a boss, you fucking go back to the Nexus and level up. Like, every time you have to go level up, you have to load. It's like, I'm like, oh my god, I had not thought about over the course of this full game. Like, that is like 3 to 5 hours of your life just spent on fucking loading screens.
Yeah. It does make me wonder, like, because Dark Souls doesn't have oppressively long loading screens, at least in the remastered version I played. But, like, Dark Souls was like a 75-hour game for me.
Yeah, it's definitely in that, depending on how much you do, it's like that 60 to 70 hour range.
Yeah, but Demon's Souls is a little tighter, but you get that. I just think the ending, the narrative presentation, the aesthetic presentation, it hits in a way that, like, is, like, I feel like Dark Souls and Dark Souls 2, I haven't played 3, I like the endings of, particularly the first one, because I think the like World of Ash you go to is so cool. Mm-hmm. But the actual like ending is a little bit of an anticlimax.
Yeah,
I didn't feel that about Demon's Souls.
I think that's true of all the Dark Souls games. I think that's a little bit true of Bloodborne. I think Bloodborne does a better job. I think Sekiro has great endings.
Phenomenal endings.
Yes, yeah. But yeah, I think a lot of times these games outstayed their welcome a little bit. Like Dark Souls 1 is an amazing all-time great game, but it is too long. Dark Souls 2 is way too fucking long. Because it's longer than Dark Souls 1, and it should be way shorter based on the stuff they have in the game. But Demon's Souls, it being like the perfect length of just being this like 20, 25 hour long game, I feel like the momentum is kept up all the way to the ending, which helps the ending have more impact. And then just like the visuals, especially like with this, I mean, like the direction and like the concept of it and the aesthetic of it was always very cool, what they do at the ending of Demon's Souls. But the execution of it here is especially cool with like the scale of the Great Old One and all that kind of stuff that they have at the end of the game. It's very cool.
The music that plays over the end credits is phenomenal. I just sat there watching all of them because I was like, this is really good. No, it's a great game. Heavily recommend it. What have you moved on to since, Sean?
So I've been playing 2 other games. One I'll hit on quickly, one I want to talk about more in depth. The one I want to hit quickly is I have been jumping into Spider-Man Remastered here and there just for some fun, which that's a great game. It is very funny to play that game on the PS5 with the load times because it has the same, like, it is basically like Miles Morales in terms of the structure of it and all that, like the look of the game. They just took all the stuff they did for Miles Morales and fed that into the original Spider-Man and upgraded it. But that game is not built to have the loading screens be non-existent. And so it is nowhere near as elegant. Every time you hit a load, it's just like, oh, it gets to black and then it fades back up in like a second. But it clearly was supposed to be a minute-long load screen here. So it is really startling every time you hit it because there's supposed to be this like wait time. Instead, it's like Peter just says a line and then just cuts to black and then it fades back in and you're on the rooftop or whatever as Spider-Man. Like, oh, whoa, holy shit. Like, it is very startling how fast.
You know what they should have added? They should have added like a Batman style, da-da-da-da-da-da, like spin in and out.
You almost need something like that because the transitions just like the way it works is just not elegant, which is like fine. I mean, it's not a problem. It's just very funny every time I hit it. And you realize how many loading times there would be in that game because every time you basically go into a mission that has an interior, you would be loading in the original game, and now it just like cuts to black at like the very end of. I think the thing is the way that like it almost feels like the line of dialogue gets cut off with how suddenly it goes to black and then comes back in.
Speaking of Spider-Man Remastered, can I borrow your copy of the PS4 game? Because I realized the only way to get your save into Remastered is to use the PS4 version.
Yes, and which you can download. They'll let you download the digital version if you have Spider-Man Remastered.
Oh, of the PS4 game?
Yeah.
Oh, then I probably don't need to borrow your copy.
Yeah, all you have to do is go to the icon on the PlayStation 5 home screen and where it says like play, if you go to the 3 buttons, if you select that, you can switch it to the PS4 version, basically.
And then I could upload my save from that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I didn't know that. All of that stuff seems a little slightly confusing to me with the PS5, but
it's definitely a little bit clunky. It does allow you like control, like so like that's the only reason I can play the Miles Morales PS4 version and like compare them when I did that. Because from what I understand, the Xbox Series X is smoother in how it handles it, but it also does just like how it handles it. It says you're just playing. If there's a Series X version, that is just the version you're playing, and there's no way to do the other way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can do that with the Spider-Man Remastered.
Okay, phew. I was a little worried at first. I was like, how am I going to get this save up there? I don't have a PS4 anymore. I got rid of my copy of Spider-Man PS4 because I have the remastered version. So,
if for some reason that doesn't work, I'll still let you borrow it.
No problem.
But the other reason why I wanted to talk about it was to say to you, Jonathan, and anyone else listening, If you have any love for the Sam Raimi movies in your heart, I highly recommend just putting the fucking Sam Raimi suit on immediately. If you have, because they added that in as like free post-game DLC for the original game.
I played with it a little bit.
Yeah, but like the cutscenes with that suit on, it's just unfucking real. It is crazy because it's not even like it's not my favorite Spider-Man suit design or whatever. I have like quibbles about it, but I love those movies so much, and it like Yuri Lowenthal's performance of Peter has a little bit of that like saccharine Tobey Maguire quality to it. That when you have the fucking Sam Raimi suit on. It is like you are playing an original fucking Sam Raimi Spider-Man game in a weird way. Because it is the detail on that suit. It's true of all the suits. But because you know what that suit looks like as a real thing that exists in the actual world, any shot that is just him in that suit and no other like animated characters, it's just him in like a background, it looks like a fucking real shot. Like it just looks like reality.
Well, because
it is crazy.
Because that is one of the best live action superhero costumes. It's so good.
Yeah, and it's not like the Spider-Man. They have the other like the Homecoming and Far From Home suits in there as well, but those suits in those movies are generally enhanced with CGI, so they don't have that like
tactile.
Yeah, that tactile quality. Like you can feel the texture of this thing that Tobey Maguire was wearing, and then now that it's like translated here, and it has like It just looks slightly impractical to wear because it has not been enhanced, so it looks like a slightly uncomfortable movie costume in a way that like is accurate to those actual movies, and it's so utterly uncanny to me that I'm having a huge amount of fun because I thought I would just because I did New Game Plus on the new Ultimate difficulty they had added into the game. So I have all the costumes. I was like, I'll just be jumping around on all these costumes all the time. And as soon as I put on the Sam Raimi one, I'm like, well, I can't switch off of this one because I don't, at the very least, every time I go into a cutscene, I make sure I have it on because I always want to see what it looks like in the cutscenes because it's fucking hilarious to me in the best way.
I played around with it. When Far From Home came out, I hadn't done the DLC, so I played all the 3 DLC packs, and I did that and the Far From Home costume a bunch, which I also love because of the black with the red. I'm excited. I want to get my save just so I can go into the world and like zip around. Because otherwise, like that game has it's really good, but it has a pretty long onboarding sequence. Awesome. What else have you been playing?
I also, because it was on sale, I picked up a game I was really curious about because it's got very good buzz. I'm playing 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim.
I do not know what that is.
Okay, I think you would like this game, Jonathan. So it is. This is going to be one of those that's like I have no idea how the fuck to explain what this game is. This is. So it's a game developed by Vanillaware and published by Atlas/Sega. And it's the first game Vanillaware has made in a long time. They made like Dragon's Crown and Odin Sphere is like the really big game they're really loved for, which is like a 2D character action game on the PS2. So this is a 2D. I guess I would kind of describe it as a middle ground between like an adventure game, like a Monkey Island or Grim Fandango, like that kind of 2D adventure game where you walk around as a character and talk to people and sort of experience the story. But it's a middle ground between that and like a traditional visual novel in that it doesn't have puzzles the way an adventure game does. You don't have like an inventory. You're not clicking on like everything on the screen to try to solve puzzles or whatever. It is way more sort of linear, directed, focused storytelling. In the way of a visual novel where you have like, choose your own adventure style narrative choices you go down, and you have like a text log that comes up that you can go through like all the lines of dialogue you've experienced and listen to replay the voice acting and all that kind of stuff. It has all the trappings of a visual novel like under the hood, but the visual aesthetic and style of it is you moving around a 2D character on a kind of 2.5D plane and experiencing the story that way. It is like a really fascinating sci-fi, like anime sci-fi style story that takes all the different kind of science fiction tropes, like stuff from like Terminator and E.T. and Godzilla and what have you, and throws it into a big like melting pot and tells this really fascinating story kind of told through individual vignettes you experience through the eyes of ultimately 13 different protagonists, which is part of where the title comes from. Right now, I think I have like 2 or 3 that I still need to unlock, but you get like, after the prologue, you get like 6 or 7 that you can kind of experience their story in any like order, more or less, and then eventually you hit roadblocks where it's like, now you have to go to another character, and once you've experienced this event with this character, you can proceed on with this other character. And it is hard to talk about because I don't want to talk too much about what the story actually is, because so much of the fun of the game is putting all the pieces together of what is going on in this like really crazy story, because there's a lot of weird like time travel, parallel world, dream logic kind of stuff going on, where what is like happening in like the capital R reality of this story is, I think, very hard to grasp. Like every time you try to hold on to what is happening in the world in this game, it kind of slips through your fingers because it's so elusive, it's so fluid with dream states and flashbacks. This is very much a game where you are like literally going into flashbacks within flashbacks as you're getting more information and different perspectives on events, that different characters will see things different ways. So much of the game is you jumping around and experiencing the story in these interesting different scenes and vignettes from different characters' perspectives as you're getting these revelations about what is happening in the world. All while you have this ultimate frame narrative where you know the game is going to eventually reach a point that all 13 of the characters are together. They are piloting these mechs called Sentinels, and they are fighting off a like kaiju invasion that is going to doom humanity if they don't defeat it. So you know that eventually all the characters will be at that point, and you're trying to experience the story and kind of figure out like, why are the kaiju here? What the fuck are these Sentinels? Who are all these 13 people? How are they connected? And it is extremely complicated and intricate, like the answers to all those questions. I'm like a third of the way through the game based on its in-game percentage thing, and I do not know the answers to any of those questions yet. But it's like the web of intrigue and like interesting twists and developments is so complicated and interesting, and it is a kind of story where every each vignette you play through with a character is probably like 5 to 10 minutes long. Like it's got a really snappy pace to it, and generally speaking, at the end of all of those, something happens that you're like, wait, holy shit, what the fuck? Okay, so this character is like actually connected to this character in this way. Or you'll see a scene, you're like, how the fuck is this person even here? Like, what the fuck is going on? And then you spend, like, if you're like me, you then go back and spend 10 minutes in this big, like, glossary thing they have of all the different events you've encountered and different terms and things that it kind of, like, collates all this information together. And, like, just stare through that and be like, oh, wait, okay, so that's what's happening there. Like, oh, I didn't even think about that this would be connected to this other scene that I experienced, like, 3 hours ago, that if I played the story in a different way, I would be connecting these threads differently because of, like, the order in which you're experiencing events. It is incredibly well written so far in that sense of you can really experience these vignettes in any order whatsoever, and you can understand them on their own terms because they're incredibly well written. For that protagonist, you always care about what's happening because you care about the protagonist character you're experiencing it through, and the scene is important to them. But then the intricacy in the writing to be able to have all these scenes interlock in different ways based on what order you're playing them in, revealing important information to the player at completely different points. And like there's stuff that I could have found out like 5 hours ago in the game that to me is like, this is a really fundamental piece of information that I am using to process most of the stuff I'm seeing in this game, that someone else might not have even seen that yet and be like 2 hours further in the game, but have a bunch of other information that they're using to kind of understand what's happening in the game that I don't even know yet. And I know eventually it is the kind of game that will all lead to like a true ending. So it is not the kind of thing where here's like 50 different endings or whatever. I'm sure there's probably like some different endings you can lead to, but there is like a true ending in sort of visual novel style after you play through all the character routes that you will then reach like one true ending. And I'm very, very fascinated by it.
How long do you think this is?
It's supposed to be about 30 hours long, which I've played about 8 to 9 hours of it, and I'm about a third of the way through, okay. So that seems to be accurate based on what I've seen online.
Because I am very strictly regimenting my gaming schedule for the rest of the year because fucking Cyberpunk is coming, and we're doing our lists probably after Christmas, and yeah.
Yeah, no, it is definitely it's long but not crazy long.
Right.
And it is also like the pacing of it's so nice because it's the kind of thing where it's got a lot of the things I like about visual novels without the like incredibly slow pacing. Because it's like I like visual novels a lot, but they almost always have this really slow pace, especially early on, where it's just like, okay, like hurry it up. Like, you know, I end up skipping the voice acting, that kind of stuff in those games at some point because it's like I need less of the pageantry and more of the story because it's just takes so long to get to the place where like things are happening. And 13 Sentinels solves that by, one, you don't have any like monologuing by characters, so the like visual presentation of the game, which I should say is utterly gorgeous. Like, it's this really beautiful kind of like anime watercolor kind of aesthetic. If you've seen other Vanillaware games, it has the same kind of art style, and it's really, really gorgeous. Great animation with so much personality, and whenever any like cool, crazy giant monster stuff happens, it has like a lot of impact because of the like the weight that everything has that they lend it with the art. But because it has this like more kind of complex aesthetic interface to the game, it's able to communicate a lot more story just through like simple actions and character expressions and movements and stuff. So it skips through a lot of like the kind of the fat that I feel like visual novels usually have and gets to the meat of what's really going on with the story. And so I have had a good time sort of like playing it for a couple of hours and then having my mind fucking blown like 5 times over the course of those 2 hours and being like, I just need to swing around in Spider-Man and just have some fun while like my subconscious is processing all the crazy shit that's going on.
It seems really cool. Can I do a quick rant
on
something? I went to look up this game because I often do that when you tell me about a game. I look it up on my phone and I leave it there so I remember to look it up.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to bring this up on the PlayStation Store page. What the fuck did Sony do to the web version of the PlayStation Store?
Bad. Yeah.
It doesn't work on mobile. I literally have never gotten it to work on mobile. It just, if you're on your iPhone, it just never loads in. And it also on my desktop browser, it often doesn't load in. It's like now it's just like if I want to buy something, I just have to do it on the console. What the hell did they do? It looks like it was designed in 2005 now.
Yeah, I don't know. Like they revamped it when the PS5 came out.
Because it was fine before. Yeah. It wasn't great, but it like worked.
Yeah, like I mean, all I ever use web stores for is let me just type in the thing into the search bar and find it, and usually that works for the PS5 web store, but not always. It's like that is the thing I need it to do. So yeah,
it doesn't load anyway. Sounds like a good game. I will look at it on the store on my PS5 when I get home.
Yeah, so it is obviously it's a PS4 game, so you can play it. It's like I'm playing it through backwards compatibility, and it's one thing that's nice is because it's like this. You know, I think the game is like 5 gigabytes or something. It's like this 2.5D art game, so it fits in. I feel like with PS5 games in the sense of like shit just loads in super fast, and you're like because the game is designed that you know like. You will play with a character and they will have like here's like they start out like in the after school in the classroom and it's like this beautiful like sunset and like God ray like pouring through the windows and stuff, and that's like how they always kind of start their like day or whatever that you play in the game. And then you can bring up like a route map that shows you from this point there's like 4 or 5 different directions the character can kind of go to get different kind of story results. So the game it expects you to go back in and replay through things multiple times using information you have, because you kind of collect this bank of key terms that characters learn of like different names and things that are important to them. That once you discover them, you can then go back through and use that. So like say it's like you learn something really important about World War II with one character. You get like World War II as this like concept term for them, and now you can use that to go talk to a different character that then will like unlock a different route. So there's this snappiness by which you like go back in and like go back to and do different routes that is the kind of thing that fits really well. That feels like it's the same kind of thing I do when I'm playing Demon's Souls or Astro's Playroom or Spider-Man, where I'm just like going wherever I want to go, whenever I want to go, and it feels very seamless.
Yeah.
And so it's very nice to like playing a PS4 game that has that same kind of thing, mostly because it is like technically way less sort of complicated than a big crazy 3D game or something like that.
Yeah. So speaking of that, I want to transition to what I've been playing.
Okay.
Because I've played 2 new games, or well, 1 new game and 1 old game that you're going to be excited that I'm starting. But the new game is I finally picked up Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity. Mm-hmm. I was very excited for this one. This is the new Muso Zelda game.
Yes.
That is specifically a tie-in to Breath of the Wild. And I was going to make my transition here of that. It's the first game I've played since getting my PS5 where I have to experience load times again.
Uh-huh.
And they are by no means egregious. They are totally fine, especially for the Switch. But any load times at all after playing Demon's Souls and Miles Morales and Astro's Playroom is like, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
Yeah.
But no, they're fine. It's a really interesting game. And I think my first thing I feel like needs to be said about Age of Calamity is that if you're going to play it, you should have a good expectations check before you go in. And there's 2 things. 1, if you don't know what a Muso game is, just make sure you know that this is the kind of thing you want to play.
Yeah, don't go in thinking this is Breath of the Wild 2.
No.
Yeah.
Even though it looks like it, because it is the thing that is magnificent about this game is what a complete fucking dead ringer it is for Breath of the Wild. It's like a pretty major technical accomplishment, I think, on that level. In terms of how it marries the aesthetic. But know what a Musou game is. You're beating up thousands of enemies, literally at times, because one of the cool new things they have in this is you can pilot the divine beasts, and in those they literally just, you are looking out at, it looks like fucking Lord of the Rings, where it's just like thousands of enemy troops, and so you're not getting the 100 KOs, you're getting 1,000 KOs. It's really fun. But anyway, you're fighting tons of enemies. You're going around these maps. There's different enemy encampments you have to break down. There's bosses scattered throughout the level that you have to beat. You have your different teammates and you switch between them. If you've played a Warriors game, the basics are a Warriors game, although this one is more specifically tailored to Zelda, to my understanding, than any other of these Warriors tie-in games. And I've played Fire Emblem Warriors, I've played One Piece Pirate Warriors, and I've seen some other ones around here and there. And this one seems like there is more of Breath of the Wild in this than, say, Fire Emblem in Fire Emblem Warriors, I would say. But also Fire Emblem just fits Warriors a little bit more just naturally because it is about troops on a battlefield. So there's a lot of adaptation, but it is a Warriors game. It's not a Zelda game. But if you like Zelda and you're able to accustom to this, you'll like this. The other thing is the narrative expectation that has to be set. Okay. Nintendo really pitched this in their initial advertising as a prequel to Breath of the Wild. It's not.
Okay.
And it is important to know, and it kind of is, it takes place nominally in the 100-year before time when the Calamity Ganon invasion is starting. Mm-hmm. But there's a twist right off the bat where there is this little mini guardian. You see him on the front cover of the box and everything, and he's this little guy who follows you around. He is in the future area when Hyrule is getting decimated, and he falls back through a time portal and starts warning everyone about what's coming. So it is actually a what-if side story that is combining a bunch of stuff. And why they do that is so mechanically. It's so they can use all the stuff from Breath of the Wild that otherwise wouldn't be there.
I had been wondering about that because I was curious about the game. So I watched some footage of it and I noticed Link using all of his shit from Breath of the Wild. I was like, he shouldn't have any of that shit though. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so the little guardian brings back the Sheikah slate and stuff. Okay. And so one of the big things is that every character can use the Sheikah slate, and you have mapped to the R button. You hold that down, and then you have 4 directions, and you can do the 4 basic Sheikah slate things that you do in Breath of the Wild for puzzles, but you do them all for combat. And it's really cool, and I'm glad they did that because it's they're trying to bring in as much of Breath of the Wild as possible. And so they needed something to allow them to do that.
Yeah.
But what that means is that this is not the story of the tragic downfall of Hyrule. This is not Final Fantasy VII. What's the spin-off of 7?
Crisis Core.
This is not Crisis Core. This is not that kind of thing where you are seeing the tragedy, and I do not think this game ends with you watching all the Guardians die brutal deaths. Mm-hmm. This is a side story, what if, alternate universe kind of thing because of all that. And I think if you go in knowing that, you will enjoy it because the story is totally fine. It is more on the Warriors level of kind of minimal, so far more table setting stuff than an actual full Zelda story. But it's fine and it's fun, and all the characters are there. They're well written. You have Japanese voice acting off the bat in this version. In Breath of the Wild, that was patched in later, but the Japanese voice acting is much better. And so you get all especially the champions. The 4 champions have cool fucking voices in Japanese. So you get all of that. The cutscenes are very well done. All of that, but just know that if you wanted to play this because you wanted the Crisis Core version of Breath of the Wild, that's not what this game is. And I think that's okay. This is not a criticism from me, but I have seen that criticism, and I think it is... I understand where it comes from, but that's also not meeting the game where it's at, because it is... The advertising sort of pretended to be that. The game never... The time travel thing is the first cutscene. Uh-huh. This game does not pretend to be something it isn't. So just know that going in, and you'll have a good time. Also know that this is a little game that could... It is struggling to run on the Nintendo Switch. Its performance is... It's a graph. It's a sine wave. It's mostly okay. It is a 30 FPS game. Warriors games are ones I always kind of wish I could play in 60 because they feel like they would be better that way. Oftentimes they don't run at that. Maybe in the new generation.
Yeah,
they will.
Sometimes oftentimes they aim for it. Very rarely do they ever hit it, in my experience.
So this one aims for 30. Most of the time, it's fine. But when a ton of shit happens, the frame rate will tank. Luckily, when a ton of shit happens is usually when you've executed a special move and you are no longer in control and an animation is playing. So the frame rate tanks happen when it's okay for them to happen, but it's rough around the edges. And I think that's kind of inevitable because this is also by far the most ambitious of at least the Nintendo adjacent Warriors games I've seen. The number of shit that is happening on screen is not necessarily different than other Warriors games, but because it is all through the aesthetic of Breath of the Wild, which is a more complicated aesthetic than I think these games usually adopt, it's honestly very impressive it runs this well at all, I think, on the Switch. And it is really cool. The aesthetic, like I said, it is an utter dead ringer. All the music, a lot of it is taking, like, themes from Breath of the Wild and then building them into big battle themes, but the orchestrations and the style are, again, just dead ringers for Breath of the Wild. So if you like the aesthetic of Breath of the Wild and you are someone who enjoys the kind of Muso game thing, this game is a lot of fun with that in mind. The gameplay is not hugely deep, although to my experience so far, it seems deeper than some other Warriors games because of all the Breath of the Wild stuff they've layered in. There's a lot of characters, and they are really heavily differentiated.
Okay, good. That to me is the most important thing, because that's what a Muso game like lives and dies by, is how many and how different are the characters.
Yeah.
Because to me, these games are very much, you play for like an hour as a character, you basically learn everything you can do with that character, and then you're like, okay, time to move on to the next one, because it is about a breadth of gameplay, not necessarily a depth of gameplay is what these games usually offer.
Yes, and this one does it really well. So I've played a good chunk of it. I've gotten through the initial thing that opens up for you after the first couple missions is they put up each of the champions on the screen, and you can go in any order and recruit all of them. So I've done all of that. I have the 4 champions, and I'm on to the next stage of the story. So I have all of the 4 champions. I have Impa, I have Zelda, I have Link. So that's 7 so far. And my understanding is there's about 20 in the game.
That's a good number,
yeah. And so far they are all extremely different. Some I really love to play. Some are a little baffling to me. But you have to learn to play them all. They're all very different. Like Zelda does not use weapons. She just uses the Sheikah Slate. And so she's like really weird, and you have to kind of learn how to do it. And like some people like Daruk has this thing where you can, with his strong attacks, you can create all these like magma rocks and then use your special attack to blow up the magma. But figuring out how to do that took me a while, and it turns out you have to do the heavy attacks in the form of a combo, and then it'll do it. So there's some experimentation you have to do. And then Link himself, because Link is there basically for every mission, has multiple weapon types. So Link has, you can do sword and shield, two-handed sword, spear, and there's probably a couple other I haven't gotten yet. And that means Link has a completely different moveset for each of those. So that's really cool. So there is plenty of differentiation there. And Thomas, my brother, is further in this game than I am. He got it a few days before me, and he's been playing it pretty nonstop. And he keeps telling me, like, oh my god, I can't believe they added this character. And he won't tell me who it is, but he's like, there's apparently some really cool like characters they've added. And,
yeah, like Tingle.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know, maybe.
Very cool.
But he is very hot on it, and he's a big Zelda fan. So, and I think the only other Warriors game he's ever played is Hyrule Warriors. So, if that sounds like you will probably enjoy this game. Yeah, I mean, if you love Breath of the Wild, if you are okay with the Warriors thing, which I say that because I know not everyone is, it's not everyone's cup of tea, then I think this game is kind of a no-brainer to play. I am still, like, in the phase where I feel like I'm getting kind of into it, and I'm not 100% sure if, like, this is the thing I'm in the mood for right now, because I think a Muso game kind of has to hit you at the right time.
Yeah.
But it is definitely well done. It is one of the better done Warriors games I've seen. And like the story might not be exactly what some people were hoping for, but the gameplay side I can say unequivocally is what you would want out of something like this. It is a really good version of that. And it almost makes me want to take some of this combat stuff like back into Breath of the Wild, because it's kind of like a better, because it has the basic combat system of Breath of the Wild where you lock on, dodge, and then you can go into slow time and do a flurry attack.
Right.
All of that's in here, but combined with some of the other Warrior stuff, it just works a little. It's like a little more fleshed out. And I'm like, I wonder if they'll take any of this for Breath of the Wild too. Kind of the way Fire Emblem took a bunch of stuff from Fire Emblem Warriors when they made Three Houses. Not so much mechanically, but graphically. I'm curious to see if that happens. But anyway, this is a cool game. If you've been wanting to, there hasn't been a ton of new Switch stuff this year. Although the new Switch stuff they've put out has sold like hotcakes.
Yes.
So, but this is definitely, if you want something for your Switch, There you go.
I'm really looking forward to Animal Crossing Warriors next year.
Oh my god, they need to. That would be so great.
Yes, I just want to see Tom Nook just murder 1,000 fucking tarantulas or some shit.
No, what I want it to be is Tom Nook, and it's like his like Bimmy and Jimmy, whatever his kids are, Timmy and Tommy, have like cloned themselves or something, and so you're just fighting thousands of Timmys and Tommies. Oh man, they should do that. What I mean, they've really only done now Fire Emblem and Zelda for like first-party Nintendo properties. I want my Mario Warriors. Yeah. I want my Animal Crossing Warriors. They probably will do Metroid Warriors at one point. Now that I say that,
yeah, that's what that would most fit. Yes,
but I want the ones that don't fit.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, Animal Crossing, you have to go like craft all your weapons in the middle of a match. You have to like go chop down a tree. Be great. Now I say that, now they're going to do a Minecraft Warriors. They're definitely going to do a Minecraft Warriors.
Oh yeah, after they've done their Minecraft Diablo.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, the other game I started, Sean, I'm going to back up here.
Okay.
My parents and my family asked me for, what kind of things do you want for Christmas? So I made up a little list, and one of the things I was like, what PS5 games do I want that I don't have? And I saw, Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition is coming out boxed. I really want that version because it sounds awesome, and I haven't played that game yet. But I need to play 1 through 4, so I started playing Devil May Cry 1 this week.
Awesome.
That game kicks ass.
That game is very fucking good, yeah.
That game, I'm not super far in it. I'm like at level 8 or 9, so maybe almost halfway through. I think there's like 20 levels. It is so weird because I'd always known the story that it started as Resident Evil 4 and then became its own thing. But it is Resident Evil plus a like proto-character action game made a baby, and it is weird as fuck.
Yes.
And my understanding is like a lot of that changes in the later games.
Yeah, like Devil May Cry 3, like it has some, like you still have the, like, Devil May Cry 3 still has the locked camera angle, and I think 4 is kind of like halfway. I think they still kind of lock it, and then but you can move it when you want to. But yes, Devil May Cry 1 is definitely the one that you're like, because the combat in Devil May Cry 1 is not all the way there yet. It's not like that complicated.
That's why I say proto-character action.
Yeah, it's like it has complexity there if you want to find it, but you really have to want to find it in that game rather than Devil May Cry 3 than 4 and 5. Like, it is pushing you to, and gives you way more tools to do like crazy cool shit and kind of forces you to do it. But yes, Devil May Cry 1 is a very weird, unique cocktail where it is like figuring it out of what this like a 3D character action game, what is that, especially when that's not necessarily exactly what the game was trying to be, because that wasn't really quite a genre yet.
Yeah, and like the setting is just pure Resident Evil. I mean, it's very, and it's, I mean, this is the Hideki Kamiya kind of flavor of Resident Evil versus the Resident, what's the other guy's name?
Mikami?
Yeah, Mikami, which is like the Resident Evil 4 flavor that you get going forward. So it's very funny to play it that way. But yeah, I am enjoying it as a piece of gaming history and just a fun game to play now. But then hopefully I can get through, you say I don't need to play 2, but it's also like 2 hours long.
Yeah, like you might as well play 2. Like that was the thing I discovered when I played it. Is it's like, I mean, it 100% is the black sheep. It is like the bad Devil May Cry game, but it is also only like 2 to 3 hours. So it's like, I mean, you might as well. It is. Yeah. It's a like interesting curiosity, and since you can play it like literally, like it's not even you can play it in an afternoon. Like it's like shorter than that.
Yeah.
It's you could play it in like the time of like watching Batman in like getting lunch. You have now played through Devil May Cry 2.
Yeah, and then my understanding is it will not take me a ton of time to get through all of these.
No, none of them are super long. Like like 4 is the longest one of those, and it's probably like 15-ish hours. Okay. So yeah, it's not crazy.
Yeah, so we'll see. I don't know if I'll get to Devil May Cry 5 like right after Christmas, but I do want to play that because that special edition for PS5 seems really cool.
Yeah, it seems cool. Like I've been sort of eyeballing it because I do want to play as Virgil, because Virgil's fun in those games.
Well, maybe at some point we will do a big Devil May Cry podcast like early next year.
I would be down for it.
That would be
100%.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I've been playing. I've been considering other things I might want to pick up. I am still trying to figure out. I would really like to play Yakuza Like a Dragon. Yeah, but I don't know when I will fit that in.
Yeah, that's one where because I should probably say it since I've talked about these games so much on the podcast. I've just decided to wait for the PS5 specific version to come out because that's going to be like February or something. Because I haven't finished Yakuza 6. Or I haven't started Yakuza 6.
Well, then maybe I'll just wait until you play it and then we can play it together. Because that one, I don't have to have played the other 6 to do it.
No, yeah.
So why not? Okay, that's a relief for me.
Yes.
I kind of wanted it for top 10 time, but that's okay.
Yeah, I looked at that. I was like, I'm doing the same thing with Neo 2 because they also announced they're just doing a free PS5 upgrade for Neo 2 early next year. I'm like, I'm just going to wait on those games.
Oh, it's a free upgrade?
Yeah.
Then I'm going to go buy that for $9.99 at Best Buy, I think.
Yeah.
Because Neo 1 is also like $9.99.
Yeah.
And I know I will like those games. So anyway, okay, that's good to know. And I don't think there's a ton coming out in March.
Yeah, because I just was...
Knock on wood.
Yeah, because I was just like looking at all the shit coming out, looking at Cyberpunk, and then it was like, I really want to play the 13 Sentinels games because I know that there are people who listen to this podcast because I got a message on Twitter that really like 13 Sentinels and they kind of put it on my radar.
Yeah.
Because that game came out like last year in Japan, and it was the kind of thing where it didn't sell super well at first, and then a couple of major figures like Nagoshi from Sega, who's the leader of the Yakuza team, he played it and like was a big evangelist for it. I mean, he obviously played it because also he works at Sega. But yeah, like it kind of spread by word of mouth. So I was like, looked at all that shit. I'm like, you know what? Instead of trying to cram in Yakuza 6 right now and then try to then force the Yakuza 7, I'm just gonna push some of that stuff off a little bit.
Question for you and our listeners who are also interested. Do you know if they're putting out a separate PS5 version of Yakuza 7, or should you just... Because the PS4 version is on sale right now.
So, yeah. So, from what I understand, and I would recommend people research it first before they buy anything, but my understanding is that there will be a free upgrade, but I think there's like some weird, like maybe the saves don't transfer.
So but maybe, right now the PS4 version is $40 on Amazon.
Yeah.
So I might just get it now and keep it on the shelf.
Yeah. People should Google to double check that, but that is my understanding. There's going to be a free upgrade path.
Okay. Yes. Google is your friend.
Yeah.
Well, Google is not your friend, but it can help you get some information.
Yes. Yeah. Google searching is good for you. Google the company is bad for the world.
Because of your Google searches and they take your data.
Exactly.
So, I don't know. Anyway, that's our modern capitalist nightmare. Sean, would you like to talk about Batman?
Yes, let's talk about our modern capitalist nightmare with Batman.
And it is, this is the birth of the modern superhero movie.
Uh-huh.
Superman, the movie in 78, definitely set a lot of the formal parameters. And I think formally is more important.
Uh-huh.
But in terms of setting the model of the length of the movie, the sort of certainly the marketing and franchising style, even go back and look at some of the trailers for this and how they pitch it. It's very rough, but it's a proto version of what you get now.
The thing of because there's a lot of specific stuff that I had not really remembered about this movie. Where it's stuff to the level of, we're sort of pulling a couple little things from the comic books, but we're more evoking the comic books than adapting a comic book art.
Right.
There's clear echoes of Killing Joke in here, clear echoes of some stuff from Frank Miller's stuff of Dark Knight Returns in Year One in here, but they're not adapting those.
Yeah.
They're just sort of they're being suggested by it.
Yes, whereas Superman the movie honestly was less informed by the comics than other TV and serial versions.
The cartoons.
The Fleischer cartoons, yeah. So this is really a big moment for superhero movies because, there was definitely a dip in the 90s, but, 1989 to 2000 isn't that long a time. And so this is really the start of the overall movement that we're in.
And it makes sense because the main, especially when I got to the end of Batman, the main movie it reminded me of a lot of, and I think it's better than this movie, but it reminded me a lot of the first X-Men movie.
Yes.
This is okay, yeah, this is where the first X-Men movie comes from. Batman is better because I think
much better
it's
movie.
way better production design and that kind of stuff, but the faults in the scripting and that kind of stuff are eerily very similar.
Oh yes. Because should I give the little history lesson on this movie?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Batman 1989, Warner Brothers had been trying to make this forever. Mm-hmm. As we know from last time, there was the Adam West thing in the 60s, and that was really the dominant popular version of Batman going on for a while, through the 70s in reruns and stuff. That's what people in the popular public consciousness knew Batman as.
Yeah, and I'll say add in for the comic books, by 1970, 71-ish, Batman had started to move on from that completely in the comics because that's when you get to the Bronze Age. So that's where you get Dennis O'Neil's run on Batman. And just to dispel some the Frank Miller bullshit myths that we have about he made Batman dark. No, Dennis O'Neil and his team, they are the ones who took Batman and brought him back to more of his roots. They introduced Ra's al Ghul and the demons and all that kind of stuff.
I think it's fair to say about Frank Miller, Dark Knight Returns brought a certain public consciousness to it.
Yeah.
Because it was a big popular single 12-issue run that you could go get. It was a single book you could go buy. But you're right. Obviously, it was not and there were lots of other movements. People inside Warner Brothers were writing treatments for a Dark Batman movie years before Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, because again, in the comics, it had been like that for a long time. Because it was the late 60s is when Gwen Stacy gets killed. Around that time is when comic books started getting a lot darker and dealing with because Dennis O'Neil, the thing that he got really famous for was a whole character arc in the Green Arrow books, I think in 69, Speedy, his sidekick, being addicted to drugs, and it was like comic books getting to that kind of material. So I think it's like important context for people to understand for Batman as a character in the comic books. Like, he had long moved away from the very silly Silver Age stuff by the time this movie comes out.
And this is really important because when I say public consciousness, I mean the broader non-comic reading public had this view of Adam West's silly Batman. And then there was the kind of the comics, the like underground cult side of Batman, of fans who were like, no, and like it became kind of an unhealthy thing, I think, of like dismissing the Adam West series where people really hated it because it was all people would, and I get the frustration.
Yeah.
If that's all people would accept Batman as, and you're reading these great comics that are showing him as darker and more interesting and complex, and you're like, I want this, I don't want more reruns of Adam West and Burt Ward. Again, I think people were, for a while, unfairly dismissing that version. Mm-hmm. But for this context, it's important to say. And then, yes, the Frank Miller is the breakthrough into like the public broader sphere of like Batman is back as like a dark character again.
Yes.
But within Warner Brothers, there was all sorts of discussion of what to do with it. And there were some people within Warner Brothers pushing for a darker version, and there were some pushing for a lighter version. The big movement to get it finally off the ground was in the early 80s. And Warner Brothers hired Tom Mankiewicz, who is a really good screenwriter, who is probably best known to superhero fans as being the uncredited but really important ghostwriter on the Richard Donner Superman movies. Mm-hmm. He is credited as story consultant because Mario Puzo was not going to give up his credit on the script, but Tom Mankiewicz put in a lot of what we love about those first two Superman movies, or like the Donner cut of Superman 2. He was really important. He was like Richard Donner's number 2 guy.
Yeah.
And so he is hired to do Batman. Makes sense. It's kind of like, quality and style aside, getting Zack Snyder to do Batman after doing Superman. You get the same guy. For some reason, Warner Brothers likes putting the same team on both of these, even though they are wildly different properties.
Yes.
So anyway, they get Tom Mankiewicz. He writes a big script. It is in the more campy vein of Batman. It's got, in the 66 style, like 4 or 5 villains. And it is being shopped around basically to different comedy directors. One of the big guys who gets close to it is Ivan Reitman, who directed Ghostbusters. Mm-hmm. Because at this time, 1984, Ghostbusters is a big hit.
Yeah.
Do you know who Ivan Reitman wanted to cast in his version?
No.
He wanted Bill Murray as Batman and Eddie Murphy as Robin. And I would really like to go to the alternate universe where that movie was. But keep in mind, this is 1984.
No.
They are the two biggest stars in the world. Like, it makes sense for the time, but like, can you imagine like Bill Murray as like kind of portly, jokey Batman, and then Eddie Murphy as his fast-talking sidekick? I really want to see that movie.
I both want to see that movie, and I'm like terrified by that idea. There's something that's just like, were Bill Murray and Eddie Murphy ever in a movie together?
I don't think they've ever been.
There's like, they feel like just polar opposite comic actors that would not go well together at all.
Well, and if you look at all the history of it, it's a lot of that, like, they take the Tom Mankiewicz script and then they say, what's popular? And they put it in a blender. Yeah. So like, that's one version of it. Joe Dante, I think, is near it at some point. There's a lot of people near the movie, but it never gets off the ground for a variety of reasons because, like, very clearly there is no clear direction within Warner Brothers of what it's going to be. Mm-hmm. Tim Burton, meanwhile, is becoming kind of a celebrity young director through a couple of big movies. Pee-wee's Big Adventure. A lot of people think Beetlejuice is what got him Batman, and the timing is wrong on that. Pee-wee's Big Adventure, believe it or not, is the movie that got him Batman.
Because, of course, you look at Pee-wee's Big Adventure and say, you know what this dude should make? Batman.
And I know that sounds weird, but if you actually watch Pee-wee's Big Adventure, you will get it. Because it is the production design aesthetic of that. It is the kind of dark comic sensibility, and the fact that if you look at his short films and stuff, people in the industry just knew this guy was a talent. Mm-hmm. And they also, and this is important, knew he was an up-and-coming director who maybe they could boss around a little.
Yeah.
And that is still the model of who you get for superhero movies.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people who get them now are not as talented as a young Tim Burton, and Tim Burton wound up, I think, exerting more force on the movie than maybe the producers wanted, although for the movie's benefit. But that is who they were looking at. So Tim Burton gets on it, and Tim Burton really is important as the guy who, for the purposes of this movie, made the decision of we are going in the darker direction. Because he got on board and he said, you know, he was a big fan specifically of Dark Knight Returns and Killing Joke. And those were his two touch points, and he said, this is what I want. And he hires a guy named Sam Hamm, who is one of the two credited screenwriters on the final version. And Sam Hamm writes a draft in kind of this vein. And it is the biggest break with, like, Tom Mankiewicz and some of the other writers had all been pulling from, like, different sources. The Sam Hamm is the first one that is, as you say, it's taking, like, Killing Joke and Dark Knight Returns and Year One and kind of putting those in a blender, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the Sam Hamm draft. Warner Brothers is not really sure about this because they're not sure they want to go dark with Batman. So Warner Brothers kind of puts it on the back burner, and at this point, Tim Burton goes and does Beetlejuice. And while all of this is happening, the Sam Hamm script leaks. And what it does is, there's no internet at the time, is it sells at fan conventions. I've heard this story from a ton of people. You would go to like a Comic-Con or a local fan comic event, and the Sam Hamm script, there would just be printed copies of it, and you'd go buy it for a couple of bucks, and then bring it home, and you would talk about it with friends. And so that Sam Hamm script made the rounds, and people really liked it. And my understanding is a lot of the problems in the final movie probably are deviations from that script. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the Sam Hamm script is well received, and Beetlejuice is a hit, and Tim Burton is clearly like, so all of this kind of stars align, and that is what gives Warner's the faith to go ahead with it. And then, of course, Beetlejuice, that experience is also what brings Michael Keaton into Tim Burton's sphere for Batman. So all of that is coming together. John Peters is the producer on this movie, and is a name you need to know because he exerts a lot of force. He is definitely one of those weird Hollywood producers who has some kind of weird bad ideas and makes his directors go with them. Uh-huh. And so the actual making of this movie was utter hell for Tim Burton because he had John Peters on one hand who did things like, we will talk about, if you think the climax to Batman 1989 is sort of weird and aimless, it is weird and aimless because John Peters had the ending ripped out of the script, had someone else do like a draft version of the ending, not a full like written script, but like this is kind of what we're doing, ordered the construction of that church set, all without telling Tim Burton. And Tim Burton shows up to set and is told, you are now shooting a climax in this church. Because the original climax was Vicky Vale dies and Batman goes after the Joker. And now he doesn't have that anymore. And so there's a famous story of them filming all the stuff where they're going up the stairs. And at one point, Jack Nicholson stopped filming and turns around and says, Tim, what am I doing? When I get to the top, what do we do? And he says, Jack, I don't know. We're going to figure it out. And that's how this movie is kind of made. And then on the other side, Jack Nicholson, the casting of this movie, they were pretty okay with letting Tim Burton whoever he wanted for Batman. Very a la 1978 Superman. Mm-hmm. It's really weird. In both Superman and Batman, they did not care about casting a star as the main character. And Michael Keaton was like a minor comedy star from Mr. Mom, which is a movie, and Beetlejuice. Mm-hmm. But he's relatively unknown. And then, same with Christopher Reeve in Superman. They were fine with that, but they wanted the villain to be someone big. Gene Hackman in Superman, plus Marlon Brando. And here, there were a lot of people considered for this. All the usual names from that period. Robin Williams, Bill Murray, all the guys. Tim Burton very much wanted an unknown. And in fact, I should look up the unknown he wanted, because I forget his name, but it's a guy, he hasn't been in a ton of stuff, but he is the villain, Daniel Clamp, in Gremlins 2. And I know some of our listeners love Gremlins 2, because I had one of them tell me Daniel Clamp is one of their favorite villains ever. And I agree, he's great in that movie, and I actually think he would have been a really interesting Joker. But the studio was adamant, no, you need a star Joker, right? And they had been looking at Jack Nicholson basically since the late 70s. They had wanted Jack Nicholson for a long, long time. And so, here's the other names that were considered. They were looking at Tim Curry, David Bowie, John Lithgow, Ray Liotta, and James Woods, all considered for the Joker. And I gotta say, I know James Woods is a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I could actually see him with this version of the Joker. That would have been an interesting fit.
Yeah.
The way it's written.
Yeah, like, there's a lot of different...
Yeah.
All those actors, I think, would have like very interesting. Ray Liotta is the one that feels like I've loved Ray Liotta, but I'm like, that's like the pick out of those. Yeah. I'm like, I can't envision that Joker.
Yeah. So Burton wanted John Glover, was the guy I was talking about. You would know him from. He also plays Lionel Luthor on Smallville. I have not seen that show, but anyway, he's a kind of comedy actor. I actually think that would have been inspired casting, but Burton was shot down. Robin Williams lobbied very hard to get it. Robin Williams wanted it, but the studio just the whole time they wanted Jack Nicholson. And Jack Nicholson knew this. And Jack Nicholson is at a point in his career where he can demand whatever the hell he wants.
Yeah.
And so Jack Nicholson was an ego-fucking maniac on this movie. He demanded not only a massive payout, so he actually got a smaller salary than usual. He got $6 million up front for salary, which was smaller for him. His usual fee was $10 million at this time. But what he got, he didn't just get a cut of the back end, which is very common. Robert Downey Jr. gets that for Avengers. He got a cut of the back end of the profits of the film and any and all merchandising.
That is a smart fucking contract to make on your Batman movie.
Jack Nicholson is estimated to have walked away with $90 million from Batman, which is the highest any actor has been paid for a movie, especially if you adjust for inflation. Robert Downey Jr. might have nominally got there at some point, although I don't think he ever did that high. Mm-hmm. But in terms of, like, especially if you adjust, like, $1989, no one has ever been paid that much for a movie. Plus, he dictated his shooting days. He dictated how many hours he would shoot a day. He demanded they never shoot on a day when there was a Los Angeles Lakers game, because Jack Nicholson always goes, he has front row seats. He had veto power over things like his makeup artist. He got to personally choose his makeup artist. All sorts of stuff. He had, like, probably line item veto on the script. He had whatever he wanted. So Tim Burton is kind of this young, up-and-coming director who's had a couple of hits, but he's not Steven Spielberg. He cannot walk into the room and demand things. And so he has John Peters on one side, building sets without his knowledge, and he has Jack Nicholson on the other side being difficult. If you're wondering, why does the Joker put on foundation to make his face skin tone for large parts of this movie? It's because Jack Nicholson didn't want to wear the makeup. Mm-hmm. And very self-transparently, it is not an artistic choice Tim Burton made. So he has all these difficult choices. And I think when you look at all of that, because it also, like, this movie went way over budget. It shot for, like, twice as long as it was planned to. He barely finished the movie in time for the premiere, also very similar to Superman 78. I think it's a miracle this movie works at all. And the fact that I think there are things about it that work phenomenally well, and I would say those things are the production design, the music, the cinematography, and Michael Keaton, is a testament to Tim Burton having some really strong, raw talent at this young stage in his career. Because a lot of Burton shines through in this, and it's amazing that it does, considering all of those pressures. Because if you look at something like X-Men from 2000, it had a lot of those pressures too, and I don't think that movie holds together nearly as well as this.
Oh, God, no. Yeah. I'd say that is a very bad movie.
Bryan Singer is no Tim Burton in a number of ways. Tim Burton has made some bad movies. He has not raped anyone that we know of. Anyway,
I hope this podcast doesn't age poorly.
I hope so too, because even though his recent career has been disappointing, I like Tim Burton. He's an interesting director. His 90s stuff is great. Anyway, that is the long entry into how Batman was made. We can talk a lot about the innovative marketing and all of that too, because this was a big cultural moment. But I think that is necessary framing for understanding this movie. And I will now throw it to you, Sean. What are your thoughts watching it today on Batman 1989?
Yeah, so, like, I'll say, I guess, like, my feelings about this movie have always been, like, it's got some interesting stuff in it, but it's mostly very boring, is, like, I've watched it a couple of times. Like, we had an old VHS as a kid that I watched a couple of times, because I think everyone had that VHS.
I love that VHS. That VHS has the commercial at the beginning of Alfred getting Batman a Pepsi, and I will just go watch that on YouTube sometimes, because it is a pure shot of nostalgia for me.
Yeah, and then I think at some point in high school it was on, like, Netflix or something, and I watched it then. And it's always been that thing where, I'll say part of it is, like, I don't have, because, you know, we were both born in 92, so we were born after this movie came out. And so I know that, like, there's a generation of, like, Batman nerds and stuff like that above us that have a, like, you know, if you are a true child of the 80s, like, you have a deep love and, like, nostalgia for this movie because of how it, both of what the movie is and its sort of stylization is very, like, powerful. But then it, like, you know, the capitalist machine saturated everything with Batman stuff.
It was a hit and a cultural phenomenon, the likes of which we honestly just don't get anymore because there's so many movies. But it would be closest to something like Avengers Endgame.
Yeah.
But it was big.
Yeah, but it's the kind of thing where I've always felt, and I still feel this having watched it now, even though this most recent rewatch is the most I've ever enjoyed the movie. It doesn't, like, I don't have any real nostalgia for it, and, like, it feels a little bit like a creaky version of Batman. Like, It's not quite modern Batman yet. It's, like, not fully, like, sort of, it doesn't feel like it knows what it wants its Batman to be, and whether or not that is because of the production difficulties, or even if all those were out of the way, I'm still not convinced it would fully, like, sort of land on what it wants Batman to be. And so I think it is a movie that has so much fascinating production design. I think, like, a lot of the direction, like the cinematography, the shot choice, like, that stuff is incredibly good. The Hans Zimmer score is fucking incredible.
Danny Elfman.
Danny Elfman, sorry, yeah. The other one. Because he's the Nolan. Hans Zimmer did the Nolan one.
Yes, yes.
That's why I made that mistake.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We will be talking a lot about Hans Zimmer later in this series.
Yeah, in a few entries in the future. But yeah, so Danny Elfman's score is incredible, although so much of my attachment with that score is through the animated series,
yes.
More so than actually this movie, because...
It's kind of like the Jerry Goldsmith theme for Star Trek The Motion Picture, which became the theme song to The Next Generation, so nobody remembers it from that movie. Yes. It's just the TNG theme.
Exactly, yeah. It's the same kind of thing where I associate it with the animated series, even though, yes, obviously it's from this movie. And so it's like all that stuff is fantastic, and I think like that first half of the movie where most of it's hanging together pretty well, it's like I was having a good time and I didn't remember this. Like, this movie's very funny. It's got a couple of like really killer jokes. I love the fucking gag of the news anchors without their makeup on. I think is fucking hilarious. Everything to do with the Joker's henchmen, I just find incredibly funny.
Jack Palance in his two scenes is mwah. Yeah, I love Jack Palance in this movie.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff, particularly in that first half, that I think is really good, and it sets up some interesting things. I guess it vaguely sets up some interesting things. There are some ideas at play that I'm like, there's something here, and I watched the first half of the movie, and it's important to also say, this is the first movie I watched fully through 4K Blu-ray. So I have the new 4K Blu-ray Master, which is a fucking gorgeous looking version of this movie. And I think part of that was like hyping up even more of like, man, this movie looks so good. It's just gorgeous, especially because in my memory, it looks like a VHS. Yep. So it's like, this is such a huge fucking upgrade. It's like, it's the right aspect ratio. My God. It's like everything just like looks so crisp and good. And so I was like, man, I've been giving this movie such short shrift my whole life. It's so much better than I remembered. And then the second half of the movie happens, and it just everything falls to pieces, and it's just like, like there's just it's so like frustrating where it just feels like it has that effect of like Hollywood came in, and you have this just like incredibly eye-rolling, very cliche love story between Bruce Wayne and Vicky Vale that is bad. That scene where they're in the fucking Batcave together at the end is the most Hollywood nothing. Like, it feels like Michael Keaton, like, as soon as the camera's off, is just going, ugh, like, why are you making me do this shit? And same thing with Kim Basinger and Vicky Vale, just saying, like, you've got to be shitting me. It's like very much the feel of a lot of the second half of this movie.
We can talk about that. It's actually kind of interesting. I do not like the dialogue in that scene at all because it's horribly written and it feels like a studio mandated rewrite, which it was. But there's some, like, I feel like there's a kernel of an interesting story there, the way they are doing the romance, but we can talk about that.
Yeah, like, I find most of the romance plot very Hollywood, very, like...
Their first date in the mansion is a really great scene.
Yeah, that's a really good scene if it had set up a, like, these two people aren't like soulmates kind of thing that then they go on like.
Well, because there's literally a lot of stuff when you talk about the first half versus the second half where like rewrites done in the second half just don't connect to characterization in the first half. Like very, very, very clearly, the Dance with the Devil in the Pale Moonlight was a late rewrite.
Oh yes,
because if it wasn't,
comes out of nowhere.
Because if it wasn't, you know where you would put it? You'd put it in the first act as a setup before he becomes the Joker.
Yes, exactly. And so that's like the feeling of the movie is like that second half. Things just start happening totally unmotivated, and it's just a movie that feels like it has setups that have no payoffs and payoffs that never had a setup, and you're just like left wandering in the darkness in the second half of the movie, just being like.
Because with the Vicky Vale stuff in particular, one of the things I love about that scene in the mansion, their first date, is that he's an asshole at the end, and he just kicks her out because he's a playboy billionaire who doesn't like get into romances, and I totally believe that that's the characterization that Tim Burton and Michael Keaton believed they were doing in that scene, is that he was not looking for a romance, and he kind of kicks her out awkwardly because he doesn't know how to do this, and then later they have to like retcon it into big Hollywood romance. Yeah. And it is very weird.
Yeah, and like Vicky Vale just like falling in love with this man. Like instead of doing like what you have the space to do, she's pursuing him because she's so fascinated by the enigma of this person rather than I'm so desperately in love with him, I need to chase him to the ends of the earth to find out what is up with this dude. which is just very eye-rolly.
Yeah. Well, there's exactly one Batman movie that's done anything good with romance, and we will be watching it in a couple of weeks, and it's animated.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes. So I largely agree with your opening take here, Sean, as people can tell. And I think the things that are good about this movie cannot be understated.
Yeah.
Like, the production design isn't just, like, nice backgrounds. It is aesthetically one of the most amazing modern Hollywood studio productions that I think has ever been mounted. It is incredible to look at. And Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray, however you see it. Even on VHS, it was stunning, and I do have nostalgia for that element of it. Like, I had a toy of the Batmobile from this movie. I had one of the action figures that was like the Michael Keaton with the yellow logo on the middle. So I have some affection for that stuff. But even without that, the way it does all the matte paintings, and it's using all these old 1930s techniques, it's doing literal mattes on the camera lens, not mattes in post, which is what you would be doing at that point. It's doing so much fascinating stuff. There's model work where you can tell we're shooting a little miniature Gotham, when he crashes the Batplane at the end, and it's little toy cars, and it's Tim Burton being this fetishistic film nerd that I love. But Tim Burton also, there's this phrase that one of my film professors uses when he's teaching Intro to Film Studies, where he says this director knows where all the bodies are buried, talking about directors who he uses it specifically to talk about Mel Brooks in Young Frankenstein. Mel Brooks really knows where the bodies are buried, and so he is able to do it perfectly because he knows the history of this genre so well. Tim Burton is that guy with all the noir stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
It is so well done, and it is such an effective facsimile of the 30s and 40s gangster films it is pulling on. And then a lot of and Batman comics have pulled on that all over. That's where Batman comes from.
Yes, yeah. It's not that Batman comics pull on it. That is what Batman was.
Yes, that is exactly, yeah. So it gets all of that. I think some sequences are just make incredible use of that. Even the church scene is terrible on a scripting level.
Yeah.
It's an aesthetic marvel. That fucking church, and when Batman knocks over all the pews, and it's stumbling by.
Good, yeah.
Oh, there's so many good shots there. And I also think directorially, even in the rougher scenes narratively, Tim Burton is on fire in this movie. This is a great intro to film style movie. If you want to teach basic things about blocking and editing and shot choice, it is really well done and sometimes very clever. In that scene when they are in the mansion having their first date, and you start with this little shot, reverse shot that is compressing the space and making it look like they're right across from each other, and then you cut to the wide, and it's a very well chosen gothic high angle wide to show this cavernous gap between them, and it's a big laugh based fully on cinematic language and expectations. There's a lot of that in this movie where I was watching it thinking man, I could cut out these 2 minutes and it is a great primer on this aspect of editing or something. It's really, really solidly made on that level. I think some of the performances are really interesting. Not Jack Nicholson. I do not like him in this. We'll talk about that later. But so all of that I love. And obviously Danny Elfman is just, he's showing off at parts in this movie. I mean, that Batman theme, and I love the opening credits where you're flying through the Batman logo and then it comes out. That's great. But Danny Elfman's on fire. There is so much that is so good. There are some individual scenes that really are great scenes. But it is less than the sum of its parts. If you add up all the good things about Batman, you would think you have a great movie. And it's an example of how you can have movies that are less than the sum of its parts, because I don't think it's a great movie. I don't know if it's even... I don't even think good, bad helps describe it. I just don't know if it holds together as a movie.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. That it's just it just sort of falls apart. And it's just that the storytelling isn't there. And it's you can have all those other things, but this movie is not a non-narrative movie. You can have non-narrative films, and if everything else is good, it doesn't necessarily need to have a strict clear narrative arc or whatever. But that's not what this movie's trying to do.
No, it's
just
not.
All those other things exist in order to try to support and amplify and deliver a core narrative that the movie just never really does.
I mean, if you break down the narrative of this thing, this movie basically never gets to a third act.
Yeah.
Because when Batman is going to fight the Joker at the parade, that does not feel like your third act climax. It feels like your second act midpoint. Mm-hmm. And then it's we're 95 minutes into the movie.
We're 5 minutes over how long the movie should have been, because the movie shouldn't be fucking 2 hours long.
Right. And so they're okay, now we do a climax. It does the climax not because you've naturally gotten through the progression to the third act. It's because it's time to do a climax, and it's really weird. The movie feels it feels both too long, because I agree on that, and also too short because like it never fully gets through a full 3-act movie structure. It just jumps from like middle of act 2 to climax and then it's over. It's so weird if you try to break down the structure of this thing.
Yeah. Like at some point I'd love to read the original script because it does because one thing I'm very interested in with this movie is like if the rest of that wasn't there, if the interference wasn't there, like what would this movie's vision of what Batman is actually be like as a character? Because I think that's where the movie sort of like it never kind of gets around to just actually doing it. And there's something I appreciate about like being around the edges of Batman for so much of it. I think is a cool approach, but I think it's one of those things of where you don't have like a firm foundation of this like vision of the character and the world he actually lives in. That's like I never buy that Batman would exist. Like, I don't know why Bruce Wayne is really Batman. I mean, I know what his origin story, and they technically kind of cover it in that second half. But, like, I don't look at the rest of the world and be like, a Batman must be here. There's, like, a need for Batman, either within Bruce psychologically or that the world needs Batman to be in it. And it's, like, a weird disconnect to me that, like, very rarely do I think there is some other superhero stuff that hits this, but very rarely does it feel like it's like you've kind of missed the call for the hero to exist in the first place within the story.
I don't know if I have that exact problem, but I do agree in general about like once Batman is in the world, like what's his role in it? Because I agree. Like I was actually watching this with my brother Thomas last night, who has I don't think any real nostalgia for this movie because he's 3 years younger than us, and we were watching it, and he was impressed by a lot of these production design things we're talking about. But he just kept saying every time Batman's on screen, it's like he's such a shitty Batman. He doesn't save anybody. He keeps tripping over things. He's so like kind of stock and like he can't move much. And a lot of that is the costuming and the time and all this stuff. And we can talk about that. And it's kind of true. Batman kind of just stumbles through this movie. He's not particularly effectual. He locks onto the Joker with military-grade targeting weaponry, misses, and then gets shot down by a single pistol. And some of which I wonder was intended to be more tongue-in-cheek. I don't know. But anyway, it's yes. I don't know if... Because here's the thing. I think Michael Keaton has a take on the character that is really interesting and well-developed. And I definitely agree that the script never comes up to his level of thoughtfulness about what he's giving more than he is given.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like I really like Michael Keaton's performance, but it is a performance that feels like it leads up to nothing. There's all of these hints of a really interesting character there. And you just like never actually get to it. It's like you're tiptoeing around the character without actually like portraying it.
There's no denouement for him other than the very basic and dumb choice of avenging his parents, which I'm sorry guys, if he does that then he's not Batman anymore because he's done. He did what he set out to do. There's a reason why in Batman Begins, Bruce looks at the guy who killed his parents, thinks about killing him, and then doesn't. And then once he's done that, goes and becomes Batman because it's unresolved. Yeah. If Batman catches the guy who did it, he can't be Batman anymore. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, and there's just like you need that like I need to feel the need from Bruce Wayne to be Batman, and I never quite get that. Yeah. And I don't think it's a Michael Keaton problem. I think it's just a scripting problem that the script never gives him that scene in order to play it.
And I have not read the full Sam Hamm script, and I'm curious. I'm sure it's not perfect or anything, but I do think like one part of Sam Hamm's approach, and we know that this is him because he's talked about this, was how he structured the movie and choosing not to do an origin story, but to weave it in as a mystery where Bruce is so distant from the world that he will never tell you it, but maybe Vicky pieces it together, and that was his idea, and that's his structuring mechanism. And I think that's a great structuring mechanism, and I really like a lot of that in this movie, but it needs a payoff. And because the third act is so weird, that payoff never happens. And I do wonder, because I know the original ending in that script and what they were going to shoot is Vicky gets killed at the end by the Joker. And then Batman goes on like a vengeance rampage. And I wonder if, I don't know what exactly that was. I can see that being more of something that would like force something out of him. But you don't really get that.
Yeah, because I think it leads to like, I think a pretty fundamental problem with the movie overall is I think it's hard to pin down in terms of storytelling who is the protagonist supposed to be. Is it the Joker? Is it Batman? Is it Vicky? Because I can see a version of this movie that has Vicky Vale being the protagonist, that is a really interesting movie. And I can even kind of see it with the Joker. I think it'd be very hard to do, and I think it's like that's honestly the closest I think it is for the movie is like maybe it's the Joker.
Well, because in a 3-act structure sense, yes, it's him because he has the call and the acceptance and like the turn and all of that.
But it's like so, and part of this is just like because it's also the like he is just a utterly unmotivated character past the first act of the movie, which is part of what he's kind of supposed to be as a Joker. It's like not a big deal that he's unmotivated, other than that you made him the protagonist, so he needs to be way more motivated. Like well, it's like the Thanos thing, where in Infinity War, Thanos is like the most protagonist-y character of that movie in terms of like his role in pushing the plot forward.
And then Thanos wins in the end, and that's why it works. Wins in the end.
And so it's like it functions really well, and it's like really effective inversion. And like here, it feels like there's hints of a similar kind of approach that just, as with everything else in the movie, just kind of peter out.
And I don't think that's intentional. I think it's because it's Jack Nicholson and he demanded a certain amount of screen time. That's why he's the protagonist.
Yeah.
And this is a problem we will be talking about for a while because all 4 of the 90s Batman movies have this issue.
Yeah.
All 4 of them. Like, honestly, in a weird way, Batman Forever, when we get there, is the only one that really tries to center Bruce as the main character, but it still has Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey literally dancing around the edges of the frame, taking all the attention and oxygen out of the room. Batman Returns, I actually think, is really good on this, but not for Batman. It is Catwoman is 100% the protagonist of that movie, and I also think Batman Returns works best when you kind of don't treat it as a Batman movie, although it's one of the best Batman movies. It's really not until Christopher Nolan where his movies do center Bruce as the clear and obvious protagonist of all 3 movies, even if he's not always the flashiest figure, and that's much more in line with other Batman media.
Yeah, because, Batman is the protagonist of this story. Like, I guess it originally was Detective Comics, but there was a reason why they did a spin-off that was just called Batman, because people wanted to read about Batman. It's like, I think of all the superhero characters to try to do and not have them be the protagonist, Batman is, like, one of the only ones you can do. It's like, there's something I so admire about, like, the approach and the attempt. Like, I think there's something very refreshing and almost like ironic about this movie not being a Batman origin story, considering it's like the first serious Batman story that's like in a serious attempt to adapt the character and not like making it tongue in cheek and comic into a movie. And it's very funny to me that they don't take that opportunity to do the origin story. But it's like there's something refreshing about the attempt. But I think it just would have been so much easier for the movie if it just made it a Batman origin.
Well, it's really interesting. It's kind of funny that it took Warner 6 tries to get there. Well, not 6, 5 for Warner, because the original 66 movie is Fox. But you have these 4, and then Batman Begins. The hook of that and why it got made is Chris Nolan finally like broke the seal on how we do a Batman origin story. And it's like they were dancing around this kind of obvious path for a while. But I do like that structure. Like, I think the idea of Batman, like, I think the first scene of this movie is phenomenal. Where you've got the like family that if you're a comics reader, you start to think, is that his parents? But you find out, no, this is another family kind of like that. And then you have Batman's intro. That's great. You meet Bruce later. He's mysterious. He is an enigma. Vicky Vale is investigating him. I love that scene where he goes and leaves a rose where his parents died and she's following. Because it's also like very noir. It's extremely noir structure. But it needs a different second half for that to pay off. Yeah,
like it's the kind of thing where if you made... Because it's like, it's very classic noir. It's like Orson Welles in The Third Man or something. If you wait and if you make the title character the character you wait for to show up, and then then they have all this weight associated with them, and I think you could really do that with Batman. But it's like you have to.
It wasn't going to work in this kind of Warner Brothers studio movie.
Exactly, yeah. Like, that's like a really tricky kind of complex narrative to try to tell. And it's like, even with like way less studio interference, I think it still would have been very, very hard for them to execute on.
Because the logo of this movie and the poster is just a giant bat symbol, and that was all the market. Like, that's what people were coming to see.
Yes.
Yeah. And the Joker. But like...
Everyone is going and getting those fucking like Happy Meals toys of Batman, and they want to see their Batman.
Yeah. So... It's an interesting thing. Let's talk about Michael Keaton.
Okay.
I think he's so good.
Yeah.
And I think he is... And this is honestly the big difference between him and Jack Nicholson for me, is Jack Nicholson, to me, comes in and is on autopilot. And Michael Keaton comes in and is making choices. And every scene of this movie, you can watch him behind the eyes making choices as an actor. And there are thoughtful, big choices. And I think the best one he does is... I think he is maybe the best and most compelling live-action Bruce Wayne for this. Tied with Christian Bale, because Christian Bale actually gets a lot more to play. It's not really Michael Keaton's fault. The way he chooses to play Bruce Wayne as a high-functioning sociopath is kind of my reading of it, where he is someone who doesn't really process emotions normally. He is not a malevolent sociopath. He's not out there killing people.
Well,
he is doing Batman stuff.
He's absolutely out there killing people.
Okay, good point. I meant like not in a... I don't even know. Yeah, never mind. He is killing people.
Yeah.
Back up, but he's
killing criminals, which is why it's okay.
Well, yes, and in the milieu of this movie, I think a lot of that works better because it is a fantasy world.
Yeah, it's very like we're in some weird sort of like 1940s mobster world or something. Yeah.
But anyway, he is a high functioning but that actually does play into it. That this Batman just murders people without compunction. That's part of the sociopathy of it, and I actually do think it's a consistent part of the characterization, which is why it does not bother me so much that he kills people.
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't bother me in this movie either because the tone is so out there.
And because I think Michael Keaton kind of grounds it because he is a high-functioning sociopath. He doesn't get emotions. Whenever he is talking to other people, you watch his eyes, and Keaton is like calculating, how do I respond to this? What do I think? Like how do I be human here? Like, that is Bruce Wayne's problem. That is why Alfred is his interlocutor. It is why he is so awkward around Vicky and everyone else. And why, like, when he makes the joke to Knox about, like, or when Knox makes the joke about getting a grant, and then Batman says, oh, give Knox a grant, and Knox has no idea how to react to that.
Yeah, whether that was a joke or not.
And it's clearly not. Like, Bruce Wayne just, he's going to do that, but, like, it's so bizarre because he is so out there. And I think it's a much more subtle version of this kind of high-functioning sociopath than you get in, like, The Big Bang Theory or Sherlock. Sherlock is a really broad version of it. This is very subtle, and they don't draw attention to it necessarily, but I do think that's there. And then when he gets in the costume, he's got this crazy fucking glint behind his eyes. And he has this weird little smile he does. And you can tell that is where he feels comfortable because the, like, moral compunctions of, like, normal day-to-day society are gone. And he can just be the freak in the bat suit. I think it is a genuinely inspired take on Batman. And even if it doesn't fully pay off here because of scripting issues and stuff, it was very influential. Every future Batman pulls from him. Kevin Conroy will be the first to tell you that the entire idea of doing a voice for Batman and a voice for Bruce Wayne, Michael Keaton comes up with that. He's the first guy who does that. And a lot of what Kevin Conroy does, I feel like, is founded a little bit on Michael Keaton and then builds off of that. So it's a really important take on Batman, even if the movie doesn't fully know how to use it. But he's so entertaining to watch. And that scene at Vicky Vale's apartment where he is trying to confess and then he confronts Joker as Bruce Wayne, and basically the maniac comes out without the cowl on, is a great piece of acting.
Yeah, no, it's a great scene. It's just like, it's the thing where it's like, it just feels like such a shame that I feel like the movie never gets at that material directly. Like, it like sets up all those ideas, and then it has that one scene. But then that scene also is where they do the Devil Dance with the Devil with the Pale Moonlight. And like, I had forgotten that's like, they don't introduce this thing into the movie until like 70 or 80 minutes into it.
I checked and it was 85 minutes.
It's fucking crazy. And it's just, it's this weird thing where it's like he's giving such a cool, interesting performance, but he also like, he just doesn't have much screen time to like fully develop it. And it is frustrating because it feels like he deserves more. Like, I'm very much in that camp of people who, or if you're ever going to make a Batman Beyond thing, you just have to cast Michael Keaton as old, cranky Bruce Wayne. It'd be so good.
He's such a great actor. Yeah. I've never seen Michael Keaton in something and not felt like the thing was elevated because of his presence. He is a phenomenal actor who I think in the years after Batman sadly was kind of done dirty by Hollywood and has only recently kind of had his full resurgence.
Yeah.
And thank God, because, you know, I'm glad he's getting that. But yeah, I mean, he is... And of course, part of the controversy before this movie came out is he was primarily known as a comic actor. So a lot of fans assumed, okay, they're going to make silly Batman. And it couldn't be further from the truth. His Batman, I think, does have a very sly wit to it. But it is really a new grounding of the character that feels like it's taking a lot of different pieces from different comics and stories and then taking its own interpretation. And I think, again, to me, it comes down to an actor making choices, which I always love to see, because that's what good performances are.
Yeah. Yeah, it is like, I think one of the things that's a shame is the how restrictive the Batman costume feels like on him, because it feels like there's so much he could potentially be giving in a performance there that is like hard Because it's like, I kind of get what you're saying with, like, he has the weird smirk and he has the glint in his eyes, but the rest of his physicality is so just encumbered by this ridiculous costume.
Because that's all he has. Yeah. All he can do is eyes and jaw.
Yeah.
Because he has no other expressive qualities in that suit, because it is literally a giant piece of sculpted rubber in which he cannot move.
Yeah, and it's part of the thing where I get why they like wanted to, because Michael Keaton is not a physically imposing person. He didn't go out and get fucking crazy ripped like Christian Bale or whatever. I mean, that wasn't necessarily the expectation for every fucking superhero.
Yeah.
All the time.
It was a healthier time.
Yes. But it's like, so it's like, I understand the reasoning on, we want to have him be an imposing figure because that's what Batman looks like in the comic books. But it's also like, it just doesn't fit with his performance. Like, I think if they had more confidence in Keaton as an actor, and they had given him a much more like versatile costume to perform in, I think he could have communicated like what is powerful and frightening about Batman as an actor, even if he didn't have like the big physicality.
Yeah. And some of this is just growing pains of the genre.
Yeah.
Because you have, for big budget Hollywood movies, all you've got so far is Superman. And what Superman did was just straight up like kind of cheap cloth and tights. And Christopher Reeve sells it because he's phenomenal, and he is also sculpted like an Adonis in that movie.
Yeah.
And he was not when production started. He was on a very strict regimen. So you're kind of like having, and of course Batman's costume style has changed so much over the years. It's like, what do you do? The Adam West thing isn't going to work. Do you do a high-tech version of that? Do you go with like the Frank Miller armor? That's kind of what they do, but Frank Miller's Batman is like still much more mobile, and like I think in Dark Knight Returns it is partially cloth, right?
Oh yeah, no, it's totally cloth.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because this is I mean, one of the big influential things about this Batman movie is this is, I think, the first, like, other than I guess the classic original Detective Comics Batman is black and gray, but this is the first like all black Batman, and Batman had been gray and blue for fucking forever.
Which is my favorite version. I always gray and blue Batman is to me definitive.
Yeah, but this movie helps really popularize the all black Batman outfit, and a little bit of the like, here we have like the sculpted abs on the suit for like live action Batman, which they take. And I think when we get to the Christopher Nolan movies, like, it's not as drastic here, but it's still a problem with those movies to me. Is like the costuming is still way too restrictive for the actor.
Well, that's why in The Dark Knight it starts and he says to Lucius Fox, "I need to turn my head."
Yeah.
And so then they give him the multi-part suit that makes him much more mobile. Yeah, because in Batman Begins, it is still molded rubber on the neck, and he can't turn his head. So there's that scene where he needs to like turn to Rachel in the car, and he like just
he has to rotate his entire torso. And,
yeah,
and it's very much, there's shots in this movie where Batman feels like a weird robot because he has to do like big turns to like face another direction.
I mean, it's honestly one where I kind of, it doesn't work, but I do kind of respect the attempt, because I think it is visually an interesting suit design, and obviously has had immense influence over the years. I don't think it fully works in its, like, I think as a piece of concept art, I like it. I don't think it's fully realized in like the molding and everything of it.
Well, if they went way harder on the film noir thing and you like barely got clear shots of him in the costume, I think it would have been great. Like some of the opening stuff where he's mostly in shadow or in like smoke.
Anytime the wings are extended, all of that.
That stuff looks really good because you don't get a clear look at him, and so it's like the costume has a very powerful silhouette. But especially as the movie goes on and you have some of the action scenes, it's just like, you just can't do the action scenes. I appreciate the attempt, but it's like, you can't ask this actor to do this with this wearing this fucking costume.
Yeah. No, and I mean, this is a problem that, to be honest, no one has cracked in the modern era of Batman stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think Chris Nolan probably comes the closest in terms of actual mobility on set. But it still isn't perfect, and I think it starts looking too much like just straight up military armor. I hate the Ben Affleck suit because it's like a giant piece of metal and it looks dumb, and he has his weird metal voice. And then we'll see with the Robert Pattinson one. It looks good from the trailer.
Yeah, this is like the whole mood that movie is going for. It looks like it might be the first time that the movie just has enough confidence in it to just say like, let's just like make this the main priority for the suit, because I think it's what they need to do.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the suit. That's Batman. Should we talk about the Joker?
Yeah, because I'm not like in love with Jack Nicholson Joker, but I don't dislike him. I think there are moments where you can see, like, if you had like early 70s Jack Nicholson play the Joker in a serious way, like, holy shit, I think it would be fucking amazing. But yeah, like, I definitely see where you're saying of he does feel on autopilot in some scenes, and there's like there's an attempt at doing a thing here with the character of going back to the original concept of Joker comes from the old silent movie The Man Who Laughs, which is based on a novel written by the dude who wrote Hunchback of Notre Dame, whose name I'm completely blanking
Victor
on.
Hugo?
Hugo, yeah. So it's based on an old Hugo novel.
And that movie has the guy from Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Yes,
and
yeah,
he
Conrad
creates
White,
and he creates the iconic smile that is now used for all Joker stuff.
Yes, and so like the premise of that story is that the character of The Man Who Laughs, I forget what his name is, but it's some weird French name, but he's got I don't remember if it's a physical deformity. I think it maybe changes if it's the movie or the book, but like basically the long and short of it is he ends up with having a face that is constantly laughing, or like having a big smile like the classic Joker smile. That like, I mean, the original like old Bob Kane and Bill Finger comic book version of Joker very much clearly literally just is that face. But it's stuck like that forever. And he, no matter what he does, he can't change from that. And that's something that's like the Joker in comic books and other versions, like sometimes plays around with it, but it's usually not like a literal part of the character that he can't do anything but smile. Usually it's just like he's fucking crazy, so he smiles all the time. They bring that in for this version of the character, and I think in the couple of moments where they try to use that, specifically the scene where he's like looking at the newspaper after he's killed the Jack Palance character, and the newspaper's talking about like Batman terrorizing Gotham or whatever, and he just says like, wait until they get a look at me, and it's like he's trying to grimace, but he can't because it's stuck in a smile.
Yeah.
Like that version of the character, if they had kept with that, and if that's the scripting, Nicholson, whatever, like if like the bits of that performance, and you see it also in the scene where he's one-on-one with Vicky Vale in the art museum and stuff, like you see these little glimpses at like a really interesting take on the character. That is the kind of thing that I really would love for more Joker stuff to go for, because it gets at something of the heart of the character that so much like average Joker, like comic books, all that kind of stuff, like the character just ends up as he's just crazy and that's it, which gets very boring. This, like, here's a dude who is probably totally fucking sane, but is stuck like this, and so the only choice he's left with is to lean into it, because he's always stuck as the man who laughs. Like, that's not really what the character is ultimately in this movie, but you get little glimpses of it.
Yeah.
And I think if they had done that, it would have been so fucking good.
Oh, I agree. And nominally, I think that's what they're going for in the first half. The best moments with the Joker are that. It's just that it's a very schizophrenic take on the character, because it is, like, let's be honest, it's primarily a Cesar Romero impression. It is,
yeah, when he's being goofy.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the entire climax, everything in the church, at the end, like when he's on the balcony, like mocking Batman before he falls off, it's just 100% like line for line, beat for beat. The gag with the teeth and the laugh he's doing is just the Cesar Romero laugh. Like, it is full on artistic plagiarism of Cesar Romero. And then there are some other scenes where he's trying something different, but it's just like the Joker is the one in this movie where I just cannot hold the multiple sides of him together, because the dude laughing like a maniac at the church at the end, who is just a complete nihilist, he just is having fun with the world, is not the version you see trying to start a gang war and take shit over. It is not a coherent take on the character. Is that Nicholson's fault? That part of it, no. That is the script. That is the direction. That is whatever the weird confluence of things happened. There is no clear take on the Joker in this movie. There's the seed of it that you just explained, but it's not there consistently. What I think the problem with Jack Nicholson is Jack Nicholson came to collect a paycheck, and that is it. He is there to... He does his lines... He does the scene, and it is the most low energy, here I will give it to you, but like you can tell he is not into it. He is not playing ball in the way like Michael Keaton is there constantly elevating scenes and throwing things to other actors that then they are able to, like Kim Basinger, I think her best moments are opposite Michael Keaton here, because she's like being given so much good stuff that she's able to kind of react on even when the writing is shitty or something. Mm-hmm. And I just think Jack Nicholson's Joker it's a very lazy performance. It is a little, one critic I know, Drew McWeeny, always calls it a victory lap of a performance, and that's what it was. Because Jack Nicholson had this tremendously successful 70s and 80s. He became a legend, and once he was a legend, he kind of just stopped trying, and he could demand these exorbitant salaries. And now he's just, this is his biggest paycheck yet, and he is just kind of mugging and doing his thing and then going home for the day, and you can very much feel that in the performance. And I think, they started wanting to cast Jack Nicholson after stuff like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I think if you got him then for this, I agree. I think he could have, even if the characterization were a little schizophrenic, if he were doing the kind of work he did on his early movies, it would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
But this is not Heath Ledger, locking himself in a hotel for a month, trying to perfect the laugh and the face and all this stuff, and really deeply thinking about it. Or even something like, I don't like this movie, but Joaquin Phoenix in Joker is someone who, it is a really considered, thoughtful performance full of choices. That is not what this is. This is I think he showed up to set, and maybe he had his lines memorized, but other than that, I do not get the sense that he went home and tried to figure out the laugh. I get the sense that someone showed him a tape of Cesar Romero, and he said, I can do that.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel that as hard in the movie, because I think there's a certain amount of he is absolutely on autopilot. To me, Jack Nicholson on autopilot is still entertaining. It is not I don't never find him particularly boring in the movie, other than when I think everything in the movie gets boring, other than the cinematography in the end. Because there are just moments where, the scene where he's in the doctor's office or whatever, and that whole his sort of what feels like a very vague inspiration for the Dr. Octopus scene in Spider-Man 2, because I actually thought a lot about the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies watching this. I think about the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies when I watch anything, but...
Yeah, no, it was an influence. I mean, that scene in the doctor's office has been just done a million times.
Yeah.
And I agree, it's great, but I actually think, I don't think Jack Nicholson has a ton to do with that, because I'm not sure he's actually physically in that scene.
Sure. I don't know. I guess I find there are moments with the character, it's hard for me to, fully separate out how much of it is Jack Nicholson, how much of it is the way that scenes are done. But there are moments with this version of the Joker that I really, really, really love.
Yeah.
And then, as with everything else, it falls apart near the end.
I'll tell you my two favorite moments with him in this.
Okay.
One is near the end when he's doing the parade. All the stuff with the parade where he's doing his dancing is some of the laziest Jack Nicholson, where he is just showing up, mugging for the camera, and leaving. It's very low energy. But then when Batman gets all the balloons and gets them away, and then you come back to the Joker, and he comes and he says, "My balloons! He stole my balloons!" And then he takes the gun and shoots his right-hand man.
Bob. Yeah.
That's a great scene. He is actually very funny in that. And I think it's some of the way he deadpans it actually improves it there. And then the other one is when he imitates Jack Palance, because one of my favorite scenes in this is Jack Palance going, "You are my number one guy." Yeah. And it's just so hammy and over the top, and I love what... Tim Burton very clearly pulled Jack Palance aside and said, "Go as far as you want to go." Mm-hmm. And Jack Palance said, "Thank you, Mr. Burton, I will do that." And he went really far. And then I think when Jack Nicholson does the impression of it to Bob is phenomenal and hilarious. But those are the only two big moments that I really like him in this.
Oh no, I really like his one-on-one scene with Vicky Vale. I think I like the "What do you want?" And he says, "I want my face on the $1 bill."
It's a good line.
Yeah, and then she says, "Are you joking?" He says, "Do I look like I'm joking?" Because that's the other moment where you get that little bit of the Man Who Laughs version.
Because he grimaces and...
He tries to grimace through the makeup and he can't. And it's that's fucking... God damn it, the whole movie should have been that. The other scene, and this is 100% a directorial thing, because it's just very standard lines. But the first scene he comes in with where he kills Jack Palance and he's disguised in the shadows, that scene in 4K Blu-ray looks so unbelievably good. Holy shit! Because the having HDR and high resolution with the little every little tiny centimeter he moves towards the camera, you can see the as the rest of his face starts to slowly come out of the shadow, you can see so much detail and gradients in the coloring. It is a truly haunting shot that I remember being cool. But watching it that shot to me was almost transformed in terms of, holy shit, this is such a good looking shot when you can see it so crisply.
And even on the original Blu-ray, which is a really good Blu-ray, you see that too. And I agree. I actually think that scene might be the single most significant scene in this movie in terms of its influence on the animated series. Because the animated series, I feel does a version of that in every episode.
Yes, yeah, it does. I mean, it very specifically has that scene in Mask of the Phantasm. I don't remember if they don't necessarily do that shot.
But the interplay of shadows and light and people moving from one to the other, and the way this movie because it's a very old 40s film noir thing, but the way Burton updates it for a comic book context and a modern widescreen color context is really powerful. And like the way you can kind of see the makeup, but not 100% until he's fully in the light. And I do think Jack Nicholson plays the "call me Joker" moment pretty well.
Yeah.
And it's no, that's a great scene. And also it's got Jack Palance, and I love him in this.
Yes. The other Joker thing I really do love, I love his fucking, like, infomercial thing he does at the middle part of the movie. I mean, I think everything about that is so funny. Like, I don't know, it's one of those things where it's like, I love that. I don't know if it's, like, the right choice for the movie to go so fucking ridiculous and silly and over the top with it. Especially, like, because that's the kind of thing where, like, if you told me that the rest of the first half of the movie and, like, all that was the same, but then at the end of the movie, Vicky Vale gets killed, I don't know if that would work. Because, like, the tone of the movie in some places gets very silly. But I do find it so fucking funny.
It's one of the most pure Tim Burton id moments because like go watch Beetlejuice. It's such a Beetlejuice style moment. All the stuff with Beetlejuice, by the way, also has a new 4K Blu-ray that is it's good. Anyway, but like there's a lot of that in I feel like the whole TV scene, and I agree. And like this is something when we get to Batman Returns you'll just see is like Tim Burton able to balance the funny and dark sides of his personality because they're kind of one and the same. Works really well in Batman Returns. And here, one, I think he's still just figuring it out as a filmmaker. Yeah. And two, he's got a million different pieces of pressure that stop it from ever fully gelling. But I agree, it's really compelling. And I like how Batman then has to do the detective work of like figuring out it's the chemicals that mix and all of that. Like there's some really good stuff in there. Again, being that we're in the middle of a second act until the very end of this movie.
Yeah, but I do just have to again shout out that fucking cut to the news anchors with no makeup on. And like the dude's got like a big pimple on his forehead. It's just, it's so funny. It's such a dumb gag that I adore so much. It's just such a great visual gag. There's nothing else about that scene. The only thing that's funny about it is that they're not wearing makeup. And that like in fact, like they are wearing makeup to look like they're wearing no makeup as like act like the actual actors. And it's very funny to me.
Oh, it's great. And I think that's also one where Jack Nicholson's sort of, I would say unintentional deadpan because he's just kind of being low energy. Works in those commercials because, like, I feel like Burton kind of like leaned into it there in terms of the overall design of those commercials because it fits with what Jack Nicholson is giving him.
Yes, it's like it's this very infomercial style delivery that is very funny.
Yeah, and I love all the like low rent like 90s TV style stuff you get in this. Yeah, in the middle of this kind of like town that is both futuristic and noirish. It's like Metropolis from the movie Metropolis, but also like kind of a weird but also like it's a 40s past city. It's so many things.
I love that like all the criminals are 40s mobsters until the Joker shows up, and then now they're like all 80s guys with like leather jackets and sunglasses on.
And I think that's intentional. And I think it's funny. It's great. One of the things that I actually don't have the 4K Blu-ray of this because I'm sure like the basic qualities of it are really good, as you've said. They did two big pieces of revisionism that I don't like for the 4K Blu-ray. One is they changed the color palette. It's a lot more blue on the 4K Blu-ray when the movie is very like brown and like almost sepia angled. And then they replaced a bunch of the sound effects. So in the original movie, all of the guns and stuff are like really lame, like pew pew kind of stuff. Yeah. And in the 4K Blu-ray, I have not seen the whole thing, but I've seen a bunch of clips, and my understanding is it's much more modern, like gun sound effects.
Yeah, they just sound like gunshots.
Yeah, and I don't love that because I actually think that it's something that really adds to this movie when it's like this, because like the guns aren't guns in this movie. They are movie serial guns. They are old fashioned, like $5 matinee things you would go see on a Sunday, bad gangster movie stuff. And it's really funny about that. But anyway, no, I agree with that. The overall design of Gotham in this movie is so good. Yeah. And obviously its biggest legacy is on the animated series, which is really able to run with this by A, being animated, and B, doing all the stuff on black paper and like doing all this stuff to innovate. But like, even if I connect a lot of that with the animated series more, it's impossible to say what an achievement it was pulling this off in fucking live action. Yeah. And then that it had the influence it had, to the point where when we get to the Chris Nolan movies, something that's easy to forget is Batman Begins, unlike the later ones, actually does try to emulate this a little bit. And I don't think it's good at it, but it does try it. And I do like that. I always feel like Gotham should be a heightened, weird city out of time. It's something I think works in The Dark Knight because of The Dark Knight is just heat with Batman in it. But I think doesn't work at all with Dark Knight Rises, where they just do an actual American city. And I feel like that's a little like for Batman.
Yeah, it's one of those things of like you need the city needs to be stylized enough for you to believe that Batman would exist in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think Dark Knight compensates for that in other ways, but then Dark Knight Rises just makes it... One, there's the weird change where in Dark Knight it's Chicago, and then in Dark Knight Rises it's Pittsburgh, which, if you don't know, those are in very different parts of America and look completely different. Yeah. But yeah, one of them works, one of them doesn't. But this stylized Gotham... This to me is the platonic ideal of what a Batman movie should look like.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it is the whole aesthetic of the movie is just fucking luxurious.
Like I was thinking about this. What is another live action superhero movie that gets the aesthetic this perfectly? Because the obvious answer is Spider-Verse, but that's animated. Yeah. So like,
I mean, I think it's something where, you know, like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, like Spider-Man doesn't live in a like exaggerated reality in that way. Like he lives in exaggerated reality because there's a fucking like Fantastic Four flying around, but they live in New York.
Well, that was going to be my answer is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, because I think relative to what the comics are, it's just as good in a different way.
Yeah.
It's just not as eye-catching as this.
Yeah, because Spider-Man's just not stylized aesthetically in the way that Batman is, so pulls so heavily from film noir that it needs to be stylized to work.
Black Panther has very, very cool aesthetics with Wakanda. Thor Ragnarok has its really fun color scheme. I will also admit, though, that anything that relies that heavily on CGI just doesn't impress me as much.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, like they're very good. I think Black Panther in particular, but there are moments where it breaks down more there, particularly like near the end of that movie where they, you know, the effects team ran out of time to be able to do it as good as they could.
And like this, it's all studio backlots. It's all big matte paintings. It just, the shot choices as well. Like this movie... People like to write, we talked about this earlier, people like to write the Adam West series out of the history of Batman as if it is not influential on literally every single piece of Batman moving forward. And one of them here is that all the canted angle shots. This movie makes really good use of Dutch angles, which is when you slightly cant the camera. Now, Adam West's series, they cant it like 70 degrees.
Yes.
And it's crazy. And it's much subtler in this movie. But this movie very clearly borrows that piece of film grammar from the 66 series and adapts it to this also very comic setting, but a darker comic setting. Mm-hmm. And I think it's something that is very artfully done in this one.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, obviously, like their take on the Joker is so heavily, like whatever Jack Nicholson is playing, like whoever would be playing it, like the Cesar Romero like interpretation of the Joker is like a clear massive influence. Yeah,
it's the basic it's what they default to whenever they're not doing something more interesting, like you said with the Man Who Laughs stuff. Yeah. So I mean, what do you think about the whole choice to do a big long Joker origin story while we're alighting a Batman origin story?
Like, it sure dates the movie to have come out, like, right after The Killing Joke.
Yeah.
I'm just, like, because that was one that I didn't... Because I just don't think about this movie as it exists, like, alongside the comic books, or, like, what comic books would have come out right before it. So it's like, I had to look up the timeline and be like, is that rip? Nope, that's 100% right. Yeah, Killing Joke came out, like, a year before. Like, okay. Because, yeah, it's clear that, like, that was... I mean, because The Killing Joke is even if like they try to like sort of slightly play it off, like it's clearly like it is the first like true attempt at doing an origin story for the Joker, and was like the most successful and sort of taken off of. It's the kind of thing that, again, if everything worked well, it would be a cool choice to not do Batman's origin, but to only do the supervillain origin. I think it could work, but I don't think it does work because it ends up. Like, because they don't have anyone to fill that protagonist role, it just ends up, Joker just sort of becomes it because there's so much focus on him, and part of that becomes they do his origin story.
I mean, part of it is you do not see Michael Keaton out of the cowl, I checked, until the 18-minute mark.
Yeah, I did the same
thing. That's a problem. Like, this is, so, you know, Spider-Man 1, when we talked about that, I love Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1. One problem it has is the first act is too busy having two origin stories.
Yeah.
But the alternative, if you just chose one or the other, is the movie would be weirdly underdeveloped. Particularly if you decided to just start with Peter being Spider-Man and just do Green Goblin, it would be way too Green Goblin heavy. That's what you get here.
Yeah.
So, like, it's a little awkward in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1, but I think ultimately they made the right choice. I might have edited it differently.
Yeah.
But overall, it's the right choice.
And it's one of the things that makes the climax work in that movie is that you have done all the setup appropriately. Right. Like, it is definitely setup heavy in that first act. But if you don't do that, you end up with what this movie has, where like they like have to desperately cram in this weird Joker killed Batman's parents thing, and again, I need to read the original script because even if you didn't do that, I don't know what the payoff would be anyways, because there's still no setup for an alternative climax that is clear to me. It just has to end with the Batman and Joker fighting. But why? Because he's the bad guy and Batman's the good guy? There's no strong motivation there for a climax.
There's the line that the Joker has of, you made me and I made you. And it's a very literal textualization of a frequent theme of Joker stories. And I think if you look at what Tim Burton and Sam Hamm have said over the years, I think that is nominally what they were going for. And I think it really never comes up on screen until he just fucking says it at the end. And that's a big problem. I think you could have done it. I think there is the seeds of that. And I'm not even fully opposed to the idea of Joker being the one who killed Batman's parents. I think it could work if you did it right. I don't think they do it that well. Because here's one big problem, Sean. The Jack Nicholson in the first third of this movie is just a normal, sane criminal. There's nothing... He's just a normal dude. Yeah,
the most out of the norm thing he does is sleep with the boss's wife, which is not out of the norm for a mafia gangster.
No, he's just a very sober character. And I actually think this is part of the problem with the Joker characterization overall, is I never really buy all of the histrionics when he was so sober before. Mm-hmm. But also, when they do the flashback to him killing Batman's parents, he's a lunatic.
Yeah.
And he's doing the big Joker smile, which just contextually makes no sense with the guy we saw.
Yeah, because the reason why he has the smile is because he fell into the fucking thing.
Right.
The movie has very clearly established this.
Do we see Jack Nicholson smile once before the vat of chemicals?
I
don't think so.
Yeah.
He's not. He's very humorless. And I actually think, again, in The Man Who Laughs way, if you took this humorless, sober man and made him have a constant smile, that's a great setup for a Joker story.
Yeah.
It's just not what they wind up doing, because what they wind up doing is they default to he's Cesar Romero.
Yeah.
Without the mustache, which is what ties Cesar Romero's Joker together.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that stuff doesn't work. I mean, I do think some of the origin story scenes are interesting and well done. I think the whole scene at Ace Chemicals is a really well executed
scene.
scene.
You mean Axis Chemicals?
That's what they call it. Okay, there's a weird thing in this movie where there are a bunch of things and people that are just characters from the comic, but they don't call them that.
Yes.
So there's the guy who is clearly Harvey Bullock. Mm-hmm. Just visually, he is just hard. It's one of the most. It's almost like J. Jonah Jameson in Spider-Man. He just looks like he walked off the page and is the guy, but they don't call him that. They call him Eckhart.
Yes.
Or Jack Palance is playing Carmine Falcone. Mm-hmm. But they don't call him that. They call him Carl Grissom. They don't call it Ace Chemicals. They call it Axis Chemicals. What is going on with all that? It's a very... X-Men does this too. The 2000s X-Men. A lot of early superhero movies do this shit, and it's very weird.
Yeah, that was the one where, at first I thought, were they saying... I literally turned on the subtitles. It's are they saying Access Chemicals? Did they misread it and think it said Access instead of, Aces or something? It's no, it's Axis, the Axis powers in World War II. I'm I don't know why.
There is a great shot, though, of the big neon sign that says Axis and Batman standing in front of it. I imagine that looked very good in HDR, because neon lights look good in HDR. But yes. Okay, so all of that. What else to pick apart with this movie?
Let's talk about the romance subplot.
Sure.
Because I think it's something we have to talk about, because it's going to be a recurring thing with these movies.
Yes, which is. One of them does it okay, and it's Batman Returns, because that is going to be my answer to everything. But.
Yeah, because there is almost no Batman stuff that does a love interest for Batman that the love interest is not a supervillain and it works.
That's why Batman Returns works, because it's Catwoman.
I've never encountered it. I have never encountered, and I don't get the fucking Vicky Vale character or whatever. I know she's in the comics. I've read almost no comics that have her. I don't know why she's...
I don't know. I've never seen one.
Yeah, I don't know why she's one of the ones that gets pulled out, because it's there's just not really a character there. But it's Batman has exactly 3 love interests that have ever worked out in any medium. One is the character from Mask of the Phantasm, which is only appears
who's only in that movie,
Andrea, / the Phantasm. Spoilers for Mask of the Phantasm movie. That's
hey, also a supervillain.
Yes, also a supervillain. Catwoman, a fucking supervillain, and then Talia al Ghul, also a supervillain. It's
not just a supervillain, but an ancient god.
Yes, yeah,
who is killing humanity.
Yeah, so it's it's the only love interests he has are women who one are as formidable as he is, in this, in that exist in the world that Batman exists in, not in the world that Bruce Wayne exists in. And then even then, none of those relationships ever are fruitful. They always, like, all those stories have to be about how it doesn't work out, right? It always has to be about how Talia can't pull away from the League of Assassins, and that's where then, you get all, like, the Damian stuff and modern Batman stuff. It has to be about how, like, Catwoman just can't give up the life of being a thief because they just copy all the Black Cat stories that Spider-Man did. And even though Black Cat was inspired by Catwoman, all the narrative material they did with Black Cat was original, and then they redid Catwoman stuff. They're like, let's just do all the Black Cat stuff that Spider-Man did. It's a very weird, incestuous comic book reference thing going on there. And so it's about how Black Cat can't pull away from that life. And then Mask of the Phantasm, it's about how Andrea can't give up her quest for revenge. So all Batman love stories are tragic. They're all about how, like, this relationship can't work out because, like, even with, like, functional human Batman who has, like, Robin and all those people around him, even that Bruce Wayne can't actually have, like, a romantic relationship with someone that works. Like, and I don't know how the character ever could. But boy, these movies try to do it.
Even the Adam West series knows this.
Yes.
Because in the movie we talked about last time, the 66, with all the Kitka stuff, they do exactly what you're talking about. And it's actually a very well done version of it.
Yeah, and it's like, it's the only version of romance that the character can have. Like, Batman's just not Superman. He doesn't have a Lois Lane. He's not Spider-Man. He doesn't have a Mary Jane Watson. Like, the character is not set up to have a, like, good romantic, like, partner and romantic subplot. And yet these fucking Batman movies always try to do it. And it sucks every time. And it's like, and the more energy is put into it, the worse the movie is.
Well, and we're going to see that big time with Batman Forever, because it's a huge focus on that. Honestly, the even-numbered movies in this series do it better, because Batman Returns does it all through Selina Kyle, and I actually think does it very, very well, because it gives this kind of subtle heartbreak to Bruce, where part of his arc in Batman Returns, we'll get there, is that he realizes he can never escape the, like, psychosis in him, because all he can actually be attracted to is that mirror version of himself. But really, that is Catwoman's movie, so it works. And even, I'm going to praise Batman and Robin for a second.
Okay.
Giving it to Poison Ivy and having crazy Uma Thurman be the one to get, and she is the only one who is really alive in that movie when we get there. I'm sorry, it works better than Nicole Kidman in Batman Forever. And then the Chris Nolan movies fuck it up. It works okay in The Dark Knight because they're not actually in a relationship.
Yeah.
And it's just Bruce pining for something he can never have. I actually think it works very well there. In The Dark Knight Rises, then they somehow fuck up both Talia al Ghul and Selina Kyle, which is quite the hat trick.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing where it's like, because I'm going to say, I mean, we'll see when we rewatch movies. I haven't rewatched the Nolan movies in a while, but, like, I've never liked the Rachel Dawson character. Like, I don't, even in The Dark Knight, I don't think it works super well. Like, I think these movies are always going for something with it.
Yeah.
It's never worth the amount of time and energy they put into it. It always could have been used for something more productive for the film, either by making the movie shorter or spending that energy somewhere else developing the protagonist or antagonist. Hey, it's like a lot of fucking wasted fucking time on this love subplot that just does not fit with the character naturally. And none of these movies are committed enough to go all the way with it. So the ones that are like to like put the amount of time and energy you need to actually do it for the character.
Yeah. It's one of the many things I'm excited for with Matt Reeves' movie, because this is the first new Batman movie, solo movie, made in the era where we don't need romances.
Yes.
Because, like, the Marvel movies have really helped, like, depopularize that. And so some of the superheroes who, like, Tony Stark needs his Pepper Potts, so you do that. But Thor does not necessarily need Jane, so Thor Ragnarok can just not do it and ignore it.
You can feel this across the Marvel Studios era, where they, like, early on, they felt the compulsion to, and as it goes on, for the heroes it doesn't make sense, you drop it. For the heroes it does make sense. Like, Spider-Man should have some love interest, whether it's Gwen Stacy or Mary Jane, whoever. Like, it works, it's necessary for the character. Same thing with Tony Stark. Thor, you don't need it. Like, you get rid of it with Thor. Like, Captain Marvel doesn't need a love interest. Like, don't fucking try it.
Right. So they've been very good about that, and I get the feeling Matt Reeves will be in that vein.
Yeah.
Although they've got Catwoman in that movie, and if they want to do Zoe Kravitz and Robert Pattinson having a weird psychosexual love affair in their costumes, I will be there for it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What I want is, like, a sex scene where, like, he goes to, like, take off, like, the makeup around his eyes, and she, like, stops him.
He's like, no,
leave it on. Yeah.
That is a pretty infamous scene from a New 52 comic book.
Really?
Yes. I mean, it's not with the eye makeup, it's with the costumes, but it's infamous for kind of other reasons related to that. But But anyways, so that's like the Batman thing, romance thing in general.
We will be talking about it a lot.
We're going to be revisiting it, but like here it rears its head particularly in that scene in the Batcave where it just makes no fucking sense that Vicky Vale, that like Alfred's just like brought her here. Like
Alfred's he's a wingman. He really wants his adoptive son to get laid.
Yeah, with like this woman he slept with once.
Yeah.
And he went over to her apartment one time.
Here's the thing.
It's like they met twice or three times, if you count the first time they met, in which he lied about who he was to her. It's the first thing he says to her.
Here's the thing. I think this could all work. And you wouldn't have to change a lick of the first hour of this movie. Or even up through the scene in the apartment with her. If what it ultimately was is he just couldn't do it. He could never, if Batman is too fundamentally broken to ever actually do it, and she has to realize that, and it's heartbreak at the end, I think it works. And I think you could even keep the Alfred thing the same. Like if Alfred is trying to get him out of his shell and he just can't come out, and then Alfred has to accept that at the end, that also would that would fix the romance subplot. That would give Batman more of a characterization. That would give a resolution to the arc between him and Alfred, which is subtle, but it's there in this movie, this tension. But instead, as you say, the scene where she comes into the Batcave, where hilariously Michael Keaton is wearing dad jeans, it is so you would never get that in a movie today, and I'm sad for that. I want Chris Hemsworth in dad jeans in the next Thor somewhere. Mm-hmm. It would be so funny. But anyway, literally, it's his costume from Mr. Mom, basically. But they're in the Batcave, and yeah, it does feel like they got someone from a separate lot where they were shooting a romantic comedy or something to come in and write the lines. And then Michael Keaton and Kim Basinger, they call cut, and they're like, oh my God, I'm sorry, Kim. And she's like, it's not your fault, Michael.
Yeah, it's like, I'm a woman working in Hollywood. I'm used to getting shit fucking roles that get destroyed by a dumb, like, unnecessary romantic subplot. Yeah,
because they make it into this, like, heightened, almost fucking Shakespearean thing, where it's like this destined love, but the Joker is in between us. And there's just... It would be bad no matter what, but there is nothing else in the movie that tees that up.
Yeah, it's very frustrating because, and one of the things that's very frustrating about it is like there are moments in the early parts of the movie where I think Kim Basinger's Vicky Vale is a really good character. It's just interesting. But then as soon as her relationship to Bruce gets like contextualized as she's just in love with him after they slept together once, it's just like the most fucking annoying thing in the world, because it's the classic, like, we've taken this character that's like really this woman character who's very interesting, and then she has sex with the guy and then falls in love with him, and then like everything interesting about her just sort of gets sucked out of the character over the course of the movie, to where she ends up as the damsel in distress, and then she's just sort of, I'm getting in the car with Alfred to go be with Bruce for the rest of my life. I don't know.
It's almost like
I'm going to go live with Batman forever. Be happy me.
It's almost like they're doing a proto version of the end of Spider-Man 2, where the ending is the woman kind of looking wistfully, knowing she'll never have the hero's full attention. But where Spider-Man 2 has built that up meticulously over two movies, and it is the perfect ending. So much so that I think Spider-Man 3 was doomed no matter what, because that is such the perfect note to leave off on.
Yeah.
In this, it makes no sense. Because it's like, in this, it's like the romantic, like, it's the exact same idea, just not built up to anything.
Yeah.
I think Kim Basinger does a good job in this, but it is thankless. Like, it's honestly kind of hard to evaluate her performance, because I think she is there for what they are giving her in every scene, and she's game, and she does good work, and it actually shows her versatility, because she has to play so many different faces of this character who is never given much depth, like the scene versus the Joker, or all the scenes with Knox, which is sort of like a screwball comedy, and I actually like that side of the movie quite a bit. But yeah, also, this is weird. I don't know how to say this. It's a makeup and costuming thing. Is it just me, or does she look like she's just stepped out of the shower in every scene of this movie? Her hair looks weird.
I'm with you. Like, it's after a certain point in the movie where, like, because in the early parts of the movie, it's the, like, we have taken this woman who is unbelievably gorgeous and tried to make her, like, homely by putting glasses on her, which is, like, her first scene in the movie. And it's always just like, dude, it's Kim Basinger. She's, like, the most beautiful fucking person in the world. Like, I don't care that she had, like, her hair's slightly frizzy, she has glasses on, it kind of makes her more hot. Or, like, movie, like, what the fuck are you trying to do? Because then it's like, and then she's at the party and she's wearing the nice dress. It's like, oh, look at how beautiful she is. And then, like, every scene past that point Yes, it looks like her hair is like slightly wet. I'm 100%. I could not have articulated it that way.
Yeah.
But I had noticed that there's something weird about her hair, and you're right. Like, it looks like she got out of the shower about 10 minutes ago.
But only like on her head.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre. And it's not her. That is clearly a makeup and costuming decision. Like, that is someone else is giving her that hair. And I'm never sure what they're going for with it. Like, is there a version of the characterization where, like, she doesn't really care about taking care of her hair because she's on the job so much? Sort of a la, like, Lois Lane in Superman, where she is, like, not done up like a movie star because of who she is.
Yeah.
But that's not the character. Like, they don't do anything. That's like a part of it. So, like, it's not a huge problem, but, like, especially when you're watching it on, like, Blu-ray or higher and you can actually, like, see the hair very well. I'm sure I wouldn't have noticed this on VHS. But, like, because all hair just looks fuzzy on VHS. Yeah. But it's a weird choice. I don't know where it comes from.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. There's something weird going on.
I don't know. I mean, Tim Burton frequently has weird hair. If he can't give someone, like, half black and half white hair, he just doesn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the answer. And again, that's why Batman Returns is better. Because he can do that. Anyway, but no, Kim Basinger, she is good. Even when the movie is not giving her anything, she's fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other side characters to talk about. I do want to talk about Knox, the one of the original characters in this movie, because he's the reporter, played by Robert Wuhl, who has never done a ton of other stuff. If you look at his overall filmography, although I have not gotten here yet in the CW verse. He was in the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, because they got a bunch of minor characters who have been in different DC things to be in it, and he's one of them, and I think that's funny. I think he's funny. I like him.
Yeah, I like that side of the movie. It's one of those where the movie abandons it at a certain point, but as your entry into it, if they had stuck to that as the film noir-ish, a slightly screwball film noir, where it's these two reporters.
It's His Girl Friday, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Investigating Batman and, slowly putting the pieces together, and that's what the movie was. I think it would be way more successful if they could commit to it.
It honestly feels like he walked off the set of Richard Donner's Superman. He is so in the vein of, that movie.
Yes, no, it definitely, if you just had him say, offhand, that it's oh, when I was over in Metropolis with Lois Lane, we were working on this one story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, this guy has got nothing on Perry White.
Yeah, yeah, I would have totally bought it.
Yeah, no, he's fun. There apparently, in one of the scripts at some point, the plan was to kill him in the gas attack near the end that the Joker has during the parade. And I actually think that would have been the right thing to do, because he has no purpose in the movie at that point. And if you could get a dramatic death moment out of it, he's worth it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he's just kind of a hanger-on, and then he has one question at the press conference at the end, but otherwise not really a purpose to be there. We will talk about this man much, much, much more in the weeks to come, but Michael Gough as Alfred.
Yeah.
I love him.
So good. Yeah.
Such good. Because this is from the period before, Alfred is, heavily characterized in the movies. This is much more like 60s Batman, where he's in the background. But for that version of Alfred, he's always been the platonic ideal for me.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, it's just he embodies the ideal of Alfred perfectly.
And he's still there in the Schumacher movies. He's the only one who sticks around, and he's good in those. I love his scene in this where he is telling the story about a young Bruce and the riding accident, and they're all in the kitchen together. He's so lovely to have around.
Yeah, I agree.
We've got Pat Hingle as Commissioner Gordon. Again, not a big presence in the movie, but I do kind of like Pat Hingle and the whole take on Gordon in this of a guy who is aware that the entire fucking police force is corrupt, and he probably is a little bit too, and he's just trying to kind of hang on to things. Yeah,
I love the scene at the party where it's what is going on? Why didn't we know about this? And it's oh, Eckhart is taking care of it. He's just oh, come on. This is so this guy, he's clearly fully aware that Eckhart is dirty shit.
Yeah. Because everyone is. I mean, this movie has a very, I think it's easy to forget because frankly, the Chris Nolan movies are pretty heavily on the copaganda, as we might say. They're pretty pro-cop, even if there is nominally some corruption in them. They're very much about the nobility, especially Dark Knight Rises. Fuck. That movie's fucked about that.
We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. But this movie, I kind of like that it's just frankly, what you were talking about earlier about where does Batman enter into this? Where Batman enters into this is that there's just no law enforcement in this city, and the cops are just either completely inept or completely corrupt, and they're not that different from the gangsters. And I do like that overall vision of things, and that you have this kind of feckless Gordon at the heart of it is fun.
Yeah, I think if the movie needs to focus on that a little bit more to have it feel, because there's something about the movie that I never really feel people are in danger because of the criminals or something. Like, we need the Batman needs to be out there. I think it's like, kind of feels like, people would probably be totally fine if the Joker wasn't around. Like, I don't know why Batman needs to be here.
Yeah, because what are they doing? They're like killing each other as gangsters?
Yeah, exactly. Like, we don't see, like, they're just like random mobsters that are doing like random mobster stuff that just doesn't seem to enter the realm of like the other characters in the movie.
Yeah, beyond like the mugging in the first scene, which, it's a mugging. It's bad, but no one got killed.
Yeah, and the dad was like a dick in that scene. So it's like he deserved to get mugged. Like, he was just being such an asshole to everyone.
Which is how they characterize Mr. Wayne in Batman v Superman. That's why he gets killed.
You fucking dick.
Yeah, anyway. Okay, but and Pat Hingle, I should say, his Gordon is also another one that is just very clearly inspired by the 60s show.
Yeah.
He's less noble than that version, but like, just a lot of this is the kind of 60s iconography still. Mm-hmm. Any other characters to talk about? I think we hit all the... Oh, no. We've got, God, what is his name as Dent?
Billy D. Williams.
Yeah, Billy D. Williams.
The Two-Face who never was.
Fucking goddamn racist Warner Brothers pieces of shit. That would have been so cool.
Yeah, because like the original idea was they were specifically setting that scene. They're like, because he's barely in the movie. Like, he's got like 2 or 3 scenes. But like the idea was, well, if we're going to get sequels, we're going to eventually want to do Two-Face. So let's cast someone cool as Harvey Dent. So they cast the coolest person in the world, Billy D. Williams.
Yeah.
And then and then in the third movie, I mean, it's not Tim Burton, but they do Two-Face. It's not like it took them 10 years to get to it. They get to it in due time, and they fucking recast it. Assholes.
Yeah, and they recast it because he was black. I mean, this is explicit. We know this. Billy D. Williams was 100% on board. He wanted to do it. They didn't let him do it. And Tim Burton's idea was to make it a racial metaphor, was to do he would become kind of like half black, half white. I don't know if that would have worked, but it would have been a take on the character, unlike in Batman Forever, where he is just a Joker, and the Riddler is also a Joker, and it's just you have 2 Jokers instead of 1, and none of them really have anything to do with their actual characters.
Yeah, it's really annoying when you see like that they had like took the time to specifically try to set something up with a cool actor, and then again, there's nothing unreasonable about it. There's no reason not to do it other than they're racist fuckers.
Yeah,
and it's like, and it just slips through your fingers. It's like, I mean, I will see how I feel about Batman Forever when we watch it, because I haven't seen it in fucking forever. But my memory is that Billy D. Williams would have been better than Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah, I mean,
I like Tommy Lee Jones, but
he's fine. He's weirdly miscast in that, and we'll get to it. All right. So, what other things have we not talked about in this movie?
So, like, I think one of the things about other characters, they're not much in terms of actual characters, but I do fucking love the Joker's henchmen in this movie.
They are funny.
It's like that thing of where I don't know, like, the psychology of these dudes they're not just, like, going along with the Joker. They are 100% into this shit. Like, they are having so much fun, and they've got the dude who's got his fucking boombox, which is a very funny gag every time it comes up in the scene in the apartment where it's playing that music and you think that it's just part of the soundtrack, and then the camera pans over and the fucking dude's just standing there with the boombox and the Joker turns it off. It's like all. It's
where they bring in a lot of the Prince songs.
Yes, yeah, that's where the Prince songs come in. And then you have, of course, Bob as the iconic right-handed guy. And they're just really funny. And there's a line, and it's not even played as a joke. And I don't know if it's supposed to be a joke because it's not played that way, but it's probably the funniest moment in the movie to me, which is when they shoot Batman, and Batman's on the ground. And it's like, who is this guy? And then one of them says, check his wallet.
That's so good.
It's so funny. It's because it's just a totally normal delivery. It's not like nobody's leading into it as a joke. Like, nobody even comments on it. But the idea of you shot Batman and to check what his identity is, you want to check his fucking wallet. The idea of Batman having a fucking wallet as utility belt with like a fucking bat driver's license is so funny to me. These guys think that like that's the thing you do to find out who he is. Check his fucking wallet. It really cracked me up.
I can totally like see that as like a panel in an old obscure comic that like gets big on Twitter as a meme.
Yes, yeah, from like some weird comic from like 1942 or some shit. Yeah.
Oh, it's great. No, that's
very funny.
Yes. The Danny Elfman score. Mm-hmm. I mean, the best superhero theme ever is Superman.
Yeah.
Danny Elfman's Batman is number 2, right?
Yes, and the number 3 would be his Spider-Man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. It's so good. It's obviously we associate it a little bit more with the animated series because you hear it every week and they build on it. I'd actually forgotten this until I was watching the end credits of the movie. Shirley Walker, who is the composer for the TV series, was the conductor for this movie. So she was there from the beginning.
Yeah.
And of course, Shirley Walker is a distinguished film composer outside of that show. And I think she basically took the Danny Elfman torch and ran with it and made it even better.
Yeah.
But it's a great film score. I mean, top to bottom. The main theme is the best part, but he does a really good job with it throughout. This is fully engaged Danny Elfman. He's on fire. It's very good.
Yeah, it's a truly iconic movie score for a reason. Yeah.
And honestly, it's almost too good for this movie. Because I think, like, the big Batman theme, it works so much better in the animated series because they are able to... Like, just look at, like, the minute-long opening animation of Batman the Animated Series that you get every week.
Yeah.
Which is just, like, a great little short film. Because it's the same piece of music, but when you're doing all these dramatic Batman poses, and you're able to do, like, the action where he does the flip over the one gangster and then grabs the other one, all this stuff you could never do in this movie. It's like the music feels like the visuals are actually meeting the music.
Yeah.
And I feel like the visuals in this movie, like the set design and everything does, but the actual, like, movements of Batman as a figure never lives up to what the music is giving it. I think there's one scene where that's not true, and that is in the bat plane when he flies up and does the pose in front of the moon and comes back down. That's perfect.
Perfect. Yeah.
But mostly, you know, the music's kind of giving more than the movie's able to give it back. And that's some of it that is just a technical thing, and some of that is they made maybe some bad choices with the costume. But hey, we got that theme, and that's all that matters.
Yes, no, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, it is impossible not to watch the first 3 minutes of this movie and not get hyped. Mm-hmm. All right, anything else to say about Batman 1989?
It's the thing you were saying earlier, that it is a movie that is worse than the sum of its parts, because it is just like, there's so much about it that is so good. And I did overall have a very good time rewatching it.
Yeah.
But boy, the second half of the movie, or particularly the last third, it just fucking falls apart and crumbles at your feet, and you're just left staring at it being like, no, but you were so good. You were so good though. Why?
I mean, you know, I think if you are someone who has any interest in superhero movies, any vague curiosity about how this genre has evolved, you owe it to yourself to either, if you've never seen it, watch this, or if you haven't seen it in a while, watch it now, as we're at this like, we haven't had any superhero movies this year because of COVID, but we're at this, like, very mature point in the medium where I feel like Avengers Endgame kind of felt like some kind of culmination on the roller coaster.
Yeah.
And this is a good moment to revisit this movie, because so much of what came later is building off this. Like, Sam Raimi very clearly uses a lot of this as a foundation, I think, for his Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think this put into context is, like, one way I can frame, I think, why the Raimi Spider-Man movies, particularly 1 and 2, work so well, is I think it takes the two major sources of inspiration in terms of superhero films, which would be Superman, the movie, and Batman, and it takes, I think, the best pieces of both of them. It takes the stylization of Batman and, like, the tone and some of the humor and stuff like that. But then it takes, like, the humanity of Superman, and it kind of merges those together into one thing. And that's what makes those movies work so well. Because that's some of the stuff that this movie is missing, is it's like, it tries to do some of the psychology stuff with its characters, particularly Batman, but it just never really dives into it. And so some of, like, that human center of the movie just is, I think, left very cold by the end.
Yeah, which I think is something that's generally also just kind of true of Burton. Although at his best, he's able to pull something out of that coldness, which I think you will see in Batman Returns.
Yes, yeah.
Which I think is, I just think is his best movie. But yeah, we'll see. And you know, as an entree into Batman Returns, I'll say, because of the wild success of this first movie, which again is important, like, go read about what this movie grossed, how long it played in theaters in the 80s, all of the merchandising. I had all these Batman toys from this movie despite not being alive in 1989, because they were just everywhere, and we got them as hand-me-downs, and you would get them in, like, used toy shops, and, like, it's just it was omniscient, especially once the animated series starts and is kind of running with that ball. And, like, the animated series Batmobile is basically this Batmobile. So if you would get that toy, it was kind of the same thing. You know, this movie was big, and because of that, Tim Burton had the license to do whatever the fuck he wanted with no one looking over his shoulder, and the result was Batman Returns. And we can argue whether or not it was the Batman movie the world, like, needed or wanted at the time. Warner Brothers certainly didn't think so. But it is, I think, one of the most fascinating studio movies ever made because it is unfucking fettered.
Yeah, I'm very excited to rewatch that one.
I love it.
Yeah,
and I want to try to get that out in December for Christmas because it is a Christmas movie. People like to make the joke, Die Hard's a Christmas movie. Well, the thing about Die Hard is you could actually just set that any time of the year. The Christmas thing is really just window dressing.
Yeah,
I will make the argument Batman Returns has something to say about Christmas.
Well, I think we'll talk about that when we watch it.
We will.
Yeah, we will definitely try to get it out at or around Christmas.
Yes, absolutely. Because I'm just excited to see it.
Yes.
Because after that, we have to get through some shit.
Yeah, I mean, I am very excited to watch Batman Forever, Batman and Robin because those movies I have not seen since I was a literal child.
No, I have only seen those movies on tape.
Yeah,
I have never seen them on DVD or Blu-ray.
Yeah, so those are the ones that, like, for me are going to be by far the biggest reassessment because I have only the Vegas. I feel like my memories of those movies are more like memories that aren't my memories, right? It's just like memories of like pop cultural saturation. Of like, I know what the movies are, I know what their plot is, I know the casting, I know all that shit. I have very little like primary memories of those movies, so I'm excited to watch them.
Me too, absolutely. And actually in the middle there we get Mask of the Phantasm, so we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. All right, so that is it for Batman. Sean, would you like to talk about The Mandalorian?
Oh my God, Jonathan.
All right, spoiler warning. If you have not seen this week's Mandalorian, please go ahead, log off, come back, enjoy the episode. It is great. If you haven't seen any of The Mandalorian, stop what you're doing and go watch just the whole series up to this point because it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Spoilers in 3, 2, 1.
Fuck, dude.
They did it.
Yeah, Dave Filoni, you fucking madman, you fucking maniac, the cackling genius. It's the threads are like truly coming together. What the fuck, dude? Like, I was extremely excited for this episode and I thought it was going to be good. But I didn't think it was going to be this good.
No, because even if you took Ahsoka out of the episode, it's still one of the best Mandalorian episodes for the setting and the shot choices. And, I mean, there are parts of this that just, like, basically look like live-action Samurai Jack. I mean, it's so on point with, like, its film references and what it is taking out of that. But then you throw Ahsoka in the mix. So I have less history with this character than you do, because I've seen less of Clone Wars and stuff, but I feel like every Star Wars fan knows at least a little about Ahsoka, and I've seen all of the early stuff, like, when she's especially young. Mm-hmm. And it was like an out-of-body experience seeing them do this in live action. For you, who have such a rich relationship with this character, what was it like seeing them fucking nail it?
Yeah, it is really uncanny. Because like, there's a couple of things here that I love. I love that they don't like pussyfoot around it. It's just, I mean, it's the literal cold open is just Ahsoka doing some Batman shit appropriately for this podcast.
Yes,
just it is just. It's the kind of thing where I would never, ever, ever trust this if it wasn't Dave Filoni doing it.
Yeah.
Like it is the fact that it's Dave Filoni who's the guy who created the character, and it's, you know, has kept her alive in sort of like through the major stuff he's done with Clone Wars and then Rebels. That like I can like have faith, could have ever had faith going into this, knowing that Ahsoka's going to pop up. But it is just like, it is Ahsoka. Even if it's not Ashley Eckstein. Like Rosario Dawson's performance is like truly uncanny. Specifically, like having seen the Rebels stuff, which is her as an adult, like not as old as this, but it's still like a very evolved and matured version of the character from
They
Clone
changed
Wars.
the character design a little bit. They make her look older, because I was watching some clips and
and Eckstein adjusts her performance where that's where you get this very sort of like serene, calm version of Ahsoka, who when she's younger, she is like very kind of rambunctious and she's so active, and like a very powerful, energetic character who matures over the course of that series, to where then you get, you know, this here stuff in season 7 where you really see, particularly in the Siege of Mandalore arc and her other story arc in that season, you get to see kind of those building blocks to how she goes from that Clone Wars version to Rebels, where she is like this fully mature, like not even Jedi Knight, because she's not even a part of the Jedi Order at that point. She is like just sort of like matured into her own person, who is unfettered by the dogma of the Jedi Order, which is a part of the interpretation of the character in Rebels that they don't lean on here. And I'm glad that they don't have a scene where they like quibble about like Mando calls her a Jedi and she's like, well, technically I was kicked out of this. Like, she gets what's going on. But like the way she's written and the way she behaves and the way she responds to Grogu we now have a name for Baby Yoda, which is nice.
Yes.
And Mando. It's just so clearly Ahsoka Tano who has lived those experiences, even when they made the right choice that this episode's not about her. Like, she's got a lot of screen time, but it is focused as appropriately on Mando.
They treat her like they do any other character in this, which is that she is a waypoint along the way of this journey. It is Mando's story. It is Grogu's story. She is one of the colorful characters they meet, and I'm sure we'll see her again, but she is not suddenly going to be the third character in this trio who's on the ship with them every week.
Yeah, and the episode is not her storyline. They put like that one little hint of Thrawn. We'll talk about that, whether or not that might be a thing for Mandalorian or like a thing for something else for that character to pick up. But other than that, this like is not her story. It's not about her. It's about Mando. But the way that Rosario Dawson's performance and Dave Filoni's writing gives you this window into this is who she is, and she is still this person, and she has had these experiences. She was Anakin's Padawan, and that like it's one line of dialogue. They have one line of dialogue that she doesn't say Anakin, but if you know Ahsoka and she says, you know, like, I have seen what this does to a fully trained Jedi Knight, to the best of us. I will not set this child down on that path.
Yeah. Like,
that line hits so hard because it's just that character. And it is incredibly impressive. It was like as you said, kind of like a weird, almost like out of body experience. Like, it just felt like almost disorienting, and it did get me very emotional, particularly at the end, the last like 30 seconds, because the episode does a very good job of not like trying to luxuriate in the Ahsoka-ness of it all. Like, it's conscious of the fact that most people watching this are not really going to know much about who this character is or not know anything about her at all, but they save a nice little chunk of 30 seconds at the end of the episode that normally would be hanging on Mando, and like, because most of the episodes leave on Mando and he's in the Razor Crest, and like that's kind of the last thing you see, and instead they hang on Ahsoka as she looks up, smiles, and walks away as a full-bodied version of her theme from the show, from Clone Wars and Rebels plays, and like that got me like really emotional.
Yeah, it's even if you take out the quality of the writing and Rosario Dawson's performance, just as an aesthetic like creation in live action, because she's a character who was created for animation. That you would not design Ahsoka the way you did if you were doing her live action first, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. You would pick a more humanoid thing because it's a lot of makeup to put on someone. Yeah. And yet it's flawless. I mean, it's exactly how she should look. The way they've done the what do you call the
head tails?
The head tails, yeah. They look so cool in live action. It looks so organic. Rosario Dawson, this is exactly what we said. Like, her just like facial structure is just like, all you have to do is put the makeup on and it just looks right.
Yeah.
Like, her overall, and then the thing that impressed me most on the aesthetic level is the physicality of the character.
Oh yeah.
Like, when she's doing lightsaber fights, it is eerily similar to the choreography in Clone Wars and Rebels, which is choreography that, again, is very animation first. Like, it's not like other lightsaber choreography in the live-action stuff. And so the way Filoni is able to direct that, and Rosario Dawson and or whatever stunt doubles were there are able to do it, I mean, man, there's a moment where she flips one of the lightsabers around to do her front hand style, and that just sent chills down the spine.
Yeah, and it is like, it's the bigger physicality, and it's also like the just like the way that Rosario Dawson holds herself, the way she walks, like, looks like Ahsoka. The fucking, like, maybe the most Ahsoka moment in the whole thing is in the beginning of the last action sequence when she kind of storms the wall and jumps up and fighting these guys, and she uses the Force to like disarm a dude who's fallen to the ground, and she looks back at him and she gives this little smirk. And the dude just like runs away, and it is the most Ahsoka moment. That like I can just like see that exact like frame from Clone Wars.
You can almost like hear like Matt Lanter off screen going like, "Good one, Snips."
Yes,
you know?
Exactly. Yeah,
it's it's so good. Her having the white lightsabers and seeing those in live action for the first time, because I was watching the episode and I was like, I know I've seen pictures of those. Did she get those in Clone Wars or Rebels? And I had to look it up, and those are her ones in Rebels, right?
Yes, yeah, with like the slightly curved hilts and the red or the white blades. Yeah,
it's so cool. White blade lightsabers. I never knew I would be so into it, but I am into it.
Yeah, it looks very good. It's the same thing of like when they did the Darksaber in season 1, where I was like, I don't know how these lightsabers would ever look in live action because they're very different aesthetically, but they work really well.
Well, and I feel like Dave Filoni maybe picked the entire mise-en-scène of this episode to work with the white lightsabers that are literally like flashing through fog and darkness. Because part of the appeal of this episode too, and like the moment when the title came up and it says Chapter 13, The Jedi, I was like, oh fuck, that's so cool. Because you forget this is our first vision of anything vaguely this powerful in this show.
Yeah.
And so when she is on screen doing full-on Jedi shit, like, it's a level of like battle competence that we've literally never seen on this show.
Yeah, and specifically one thing I like is that it's not just a Jedi, it's Ahsoka, because she's not just a very, very powerful, like she's a soldier, right? Like her whole life her training was on the battlefield with Anakin. So her tactics are guerrilla warfare basically. And I love that there's that detail there. That a normal Jedi would not have gone about it this way, I think. Like, they would have tried to do as much diplomacy as possible, and if it breaks down, it's probably like a full-on assault, right? And it's like, we're doing it honorably or whatever. And Ahsoka is not doing that, right? She is taking advantage of the terrain. She is ambushing people, and there's like a canniness to her combat tactics here that feel very like true to the character in a way I really love.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. And like, just because also like that, and also because she's one of the only surviving Jedi, by definition, she's also one of the most powerful.
Yes.
Right? Like, because she lived through a lot of shit.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the furthest in her timeline we've seen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like depending on, and this is like a thing that like people who've seen Rebels are like debating online. Like, there's an epilogue in Rebels, and people are trying to figure out, is this before or after the epilogue in Rebels? And it's kind of hard to pin down, because that's part of like what the nature of that Thrawn questions he asks like has a lot of implication for the epilogue in Rebels.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. But like, it is cool to see her fully, like, this isn't just post, Order 66. This is post the fall of the Empire.
Yes.
With Luke and everything, which also makes me, I would really love to see some stories of what she was up to during all of that. I don't know if I don't know, maybe there's comics that have done that or something.
Not that I know of. Okay. I think it's like probably a hard thing to do, because I think it would be hard to ever have like Ahsoka interact with Luke. It would just be like confusing. I think so. It's like I personally would probably want them to like leave that to your imagination. And
but I just mean somewhere else in space, like while the Death Star shit is going on, like where is she?
Yeah.
Because maybe she has even bigger. Because that's one of the implications here, honestly, is that she feels like she has a bigger view of the conflict because she's like the only living figure who's seen all of it.
Yes, and I really love that she is out here on the Outer Rim with Mando, and it's like something that this season is starting to put into perspective is that it is very knowingly set in like buttfuck nowhere space, right?
Yes.
This is the dead end side of the galaxy where like law and order very rarely visits. Like the most they had was like the fascist like tyranny of the Empire, but even then the Empire didn't have a strong grip on the Outer Rim. And it is the part of the world that the New Republic is maybe kind of ignoring, because it's part of like the world that whole conflict ignored. And I like the idea that Ahsoka is out here where it actually matters, because unlike the Jedi, she understands that it matters out here. Like, it matters on the margins. It doesn't matter in Coruscant as much.
Yeah, if you take like the sequel trilogy as gospel, which I don't really want to, but if you wanted to, you would say this is the point where Luke would be like off training new Padawans or something, and Ahsoka's like, no, there's work to be done.
Yeah, there's work to be done, and like we can't turn a blind eye to the people out here who are suffering that need help, because this is where the Empire like regroups is in the Outer Rim.
Right. Yeah. So it's really cool. She essentially feels like a character who is, and I think it's well positioned here, she's always fighting a war that's never really going to be won, because it is so much bigger than what any one person can effectuate.
Yeah.
And again, she has a bigger vision of all this than anyone else. Okay, so the mystery of the episode is, who is she looking for? I don't know if other viewers were able to get that, if they've seen all this stuff. For me, I was like, oh, I wonder who it's going to be. And then he says Vice Admiral Thrawn, and I'm like, holy
Grand
shit.
Admiral Thrawn.
Grand Admiral Thrawn. Okay, yes. Sorry. Tell us a little bit about the history of Thrawn, because of course he's in the books, but then they reintroduced him in Rebels in a totally different context, right?
So Thrawn is definitely like the most popular, well-known expanded universe character in Star Wars, because he was introduced in a trilogy of novels written by Timothy Zahn back in like the 80s. Like, this is like old expanded universe stuff that was decanonized when Disney bought them out.
And the Zahn trilogy, like, essentially almost operated as a episode 7, 8, 9 thing,
yes,
right?
Yeah. It was effectively a sequel trilogy story that featured Thrawn, who is a admiral from, like, the old Empire, and he's doing his shit, and, like, Luke and Leia and Han have to fight him and all that stuff. And he's a really interesting character. And so, because he was so popular and beloved, after the old canon got scrapped, Filoni and his team brought him back as a like new version of the character that like takes most of the traits from the original version of the character, who is like ultimately becomes the primary antagonist of Rebels. He's introduced in season 3, but season 3 and season 4 are like about him, and it's about like kind of defeating him. As well as I'm pretty sure Disney got Timothy Zahn back to write a new Thrawn novel. Yes. That's like the backstory of the new version of the character.
It's just called Thrawn.
Yes.
And it was actually like a New York Times bestseller. It was big.
People like fucking Grand Admiral Thrawn. And for a good reason, because he's a really interesting villain. Because he's that kind of like intelligent villain that you can't help but respect, because his whole methodology is he learns and seeks to understand everything about his opponent or whatever he's fighting. So a big thing in Rebels is that he is subjugating the planet of Ryloth, which is where the Twi'leks are from. And one of the main characters in Rebels, Hera, is a Twi'lek. So a big thing there is like them encountering Thrawn and seeing this, like he is like an expert in their history, but also like their culture and their art. And he has like Twi'lek paintings and sculptures and stuff in his office.
So he's like General MacArthur in Japan.
Yeah. Like he's trying to understand everything about these people so that he can be better at his job for the Empire. And then he also has some motivations of his own, that he's from an alien race called the Chiss, and that's like where his true loyalties lie, is with his people, and he's using his position in the Empire to kind of help them. It's also part of his character. But basically, Thrawn is defeated at the end of Rebels, but his like ultimate fate of whether or not he's alive or dead is left like mysteriously. And with like along with like other characters from that show whose fate, like the story arc is resolved, but their fate is not like, there's no pin in it, right? So there's like room to expand on it. And so one of those characters is Thrawn. And so having here Ahsoka name drop that, there's a couple of things that could mean. Like one, like I just like it for the episode of like, as a fan of Ahsoka, like just to give me that little nugget of like, what is Ahsoka doing here? Like, why is she on this planet? Like, why is she spending this time resolving this scenario when she could be anywhere? Like there's injustices happening everywhere. Why is she focusing on this one? And so having that little Thrawn drop is interesting. And there's a chance that is more a thing that Filoni is kind of planting as a seed for a different show that he wants to do. That's a possibility. My guess is I think they're setting up Thrawn to be a bigger antagonist for the Mandalorian show for future seasons. Because I'm guessing, my theory is that they're going to basically resolve the Grand Moff Gideon stuff at the end of this season. The Giancarlo Esposito character, who is the villain in season 1. I think they're either going to defeat him or whatever, but I suspect that Gideon is probably an underling of Thrawn, because Gideon's methodologies are like kind of similar. The whole thing of him having the Darksaber, which is a Mandalorian artifact, and his like knowledge that he has from Mandalore of Mando's true identity and stuff, that hooks into a Thrawn-esque ideology that I'm guessing they're going to like loop that in. And that's what I want them to do, because I think that would be a cool thing of like, I don't think Mando is ever himself going to be on the scale of a Thrawn type character, but him like running around the feet of people like Ahsoka and Bo-Katan and like them as they're trying to deal with the Thrawn stuff, that sounds like an interesting direction for the show to go in future seasons.
I agree, because I just don't think this show, which really like rewards the viewer's attention to all the different pieces they put on the table, would do a name drop that big and then say, if we ever make an Ahsoka spinoff, maybe we use it. I just don't think that's what they would do. I agree. I think like Jon Favreau is so meticulous about the planning of this entire thing, and Dave Filoni we know is a meticulous guy, and they're essentially the leads on this, and we also know Dave Filoni would love nothing more than to put Grand Admiral Thrawn in live action for the first time.
And specifically, they cast Lars Mikkelsen to voice the character and kind of model the character a little bit off of his look with blue skin in Rebels. And that feels like, I mean, that always felt like an intentional choice that if we want to use this character for something in live action, let's cast someone that we know we would be able to use.
Yeah, and they can get Lars Mikkelsen. If they can get Rosario Dawson, they can get Lars Mikkelsen, who is also, he is in the shadow of Mads sometimes, but he is also a very good actor.
Yeah.
And, that's such a fun idea. Yeah. No, I mean, it's great. It does feel like The Mandalorian is going to have a lot of big... Like, this season has done a lot of big mythology stuff these last couple episodes, and I think they've done a good job of doing that without slowing down the action. It really just feels like Mando taking these steps into a larger and larger world, that he is never really going to be that big. You know, I love that they did exactly what you said last week, Sean, of that they had to have Ahsoka and Mando fight when they meet.
Yes.
But I love that Mando, the moment that starts, he knows there's no fucking way I can win this, so it's just, hey, please talk to me, please talk, come on.
Please don't cut my head off with your laser sword, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The most he can do is like the trick with his flamethrower.
Yeah.
But yes, she would cut him in half in seconds. So, and luckily she is a reasonable person, and they talked. Which means we also get a big info dump about the child.
Yeah, that whole middle section of the episode, we are just fucking feasting. Like, that is just, it's the, I mean, you're getting some of, like, the most rich, I think, like, character development with Mando and Grogu, as well as, I love the way that they use Ahsoka to sort of, like, ease you more into, like, the spiritual force side of this world, because she's so knowledgeable on it, and Mando doesn't know shit about it, but, like, he's... You know, he has that line he says about, like, when she's asking him about, like, whether or not Grogu, like, has his connection to the Force. And Mando's answer to that is, like, I've seen him do things that I cannot explain. Yeah. And so it's like Mando's, you know, he doesn't know shit about what's going on, but part of his, like, weird backwater existence means he's, like, open to the possibility of what is happening here. Yeah.
I have to say, I have seen some of the dumbest takes in the history of the internet on people disappointed that they finally gave the child a name. And like more, and they're like, no, it should be mysterious forever, and we have to call him Baby Yoda. And Grogu is a silly sounding name, and I'm like, guys, this is Star Wars. If he didn't have a silly sounding name, it wouldn't be a Star Wars name.
It's like, back up for a second. The name of the show is The Mandalorian. Like, everything is going to be fucking silly, okay?
Yeah. Isn't the name of him like Jin Djarin or something?
Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah,
like,
Jin is
come on. When they said Grogu, I was like, perfect. Yes, because one, that sounds like a Muppet, which is what he is, and two, it sounds like a Star Wars character.
Yeah,
perfect. I love it. And I love that he has an actual name. You can all still call him Baby Yoda. That's totally fine. He will always be Baby Yoda in our hearts. But just, we know what his actual name is. And, like, he's existed in this world for 50 years. And, like, getting all that backstory is cool. And, like, you know, he's going to have to be more of a... He can't always just be the cute baby in the back with no development. Or else the show would never go anywhere.
Yeah, no. And I really like the name Grogu. I think it's like, I mean, no matter what the name is, it's not going to live up to, like, weird, I don't know what people wanted. Like, there's no, you can't just be, it's just like they haven't said the name for so long, which makes sense because
how would you know?
How? Yeah, exactly. Like, the reason why the name is a mystery is just because Mando has not had access to anything that would have been able to tell him the child's name. So yeah, like I think everyone has that reaction immediately of like, oh, okay, his name is Grogu. And to be disappointed by it is like, I mean, you just have to, this is the fucking character's name.
Do you just not want the show to ever go anywhere? Like,
but I feel like they do a very good job immediately of making it like, okay, yes, I accept his name is Grogu, because then Mando says Grogu, and then Grogu goes, Mrr, and like looks at him, and every time Mando says Grogu's name, and Grogu like immediately like stops whatever he's doing and makes eye contact with Mando, fucking perfect. It's like,
great.
It's like the cutest Baby Yoda / Grogu has maybe ever been.
Because of course this one really leans into the idea that he is much more intelligent and like worldly than we knew, and we've got
he's far more aware of what's going on around him than he implies with his behavior.
He's still a kid. He's still a little Baby Yoda because he is 50, but in the overall span of things.
Yeah, but he's, you know, eventually going to be 900 years old.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is why, but there's this sense of like, you know, just like getting the to know that like, oh shit, he was a child at the temple when Order 66 happened, which... Do you think we ever get a flashback episode about Grogu getting out of the temple and like in the background is like Anakin just mowing down kids?
Yeah, I mean, like I've seen people like try to theorize about like, oh, who was the Jedi who got him out? Like, I don't necessarily. We might get that. I don't think it's.
It's not essential. I'm just curious.
Yeah, but I've seen some people, as they do with like anything with a TV show these days, because people are bad at watching serial stories, is they're like, any piece of information that is not explicitly told you has to be like some mystery about, oh my god, who was it? Was it Quinlan Vos secretly? And we're going to get the Quinlan Vos show because he's the one who saved Grogu? No. Probably not. But we might get the flashback in like episode 1 of season 3 or something, as like Grogu has a nightmare that he wakes up from.
It's one of those things that if Jon Favreau or Dave Filoni wanted to do it and they felt like they had a take on it, I would 100% watch it. If they felt like they never had a take on it and didn't want to do it, they shouldn't do it. Like that's the kind of thing. It's just, I don't need it as an answer. I just wonder if there's a good story to tell there, and if there is, I want to see it told. That's all.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he is very cute in this episode. That puppet, man. We haven't talked that much this season about what a good puppet that is, but it is incredible.
Yeah. Well, it's a combination of like the puppet and then the CG effects team that when they do shots that can't be done with the puppet, they do the CG to look like a puppet.
Yeah.
Which is so cool and smart of like, you've got your perfect reference to make it look like it exists in the real world because you have a real thing to reference.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is remarkable.
Just talking about like the miracle of this show is that its two main characters are a dude who's always in a mask that has no facial features and a puppet. And that's your main cast of this show. And it works like that, breaks every rule of television, and it works.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think one thing it does is it makes it, when you get an episode like this where you get way more insight into these two people and how they feel about each other, like it feels so impactful. And like those moments where Ahsoka is effectively translating for Grogu and like expressing his emotions in a way that we can like directly understand, and that Grogu has a way more complex internal reality, that like he is a creature that isn't just like happy or scared. Like he also feels shame. Like he's hidden himself, right, for years, and he's been afraid, and like that has had an effect on him. And
it rewrites all the times we've seen him use the Force, because it's like, sometimes it's silly, but if he's doing it when he's hungry, it's because he's hungry, and it's like this base instinct. Or like the silliest thing he's done is obviously with the little ball in there. But that's because he's anxious, and I think this episode like actually ties that all together. Of him playing with that little ball on the ship is totally an anxiety thing. It's like a safety blanket. It connects him to Mando, who is effectively a father figure at this point.
Yeah, who's also a little like chrome sphere, basically.
When this episode starts with him with Baby Yoda, Grogu, this is gonna be hard. But with Grogu like taking the little ball, and then Mando takes it and puts it in his pocket. As soon as they started doing the stuff with the Force Rock, I'm like, he's gonna use that ball.
Yeah,
he's good. That's what he's gonna connect with, and he does it. And the amount of like, I knew I loved this show. I knew I loved these characters. But the amount of emotion I felt watching him pull that out of his pocket and offer it, and then Grogu taking it, was more than I was prepared for. Like, because it's just it underlines for you how much that relationship has been built in these 13 episodes. And it's a glacial pace of that building relationship, I think. But, you know, over time you see they really are a family. Yeah. Which is why Ahsoka is scared, and why it is fraught what the future is going to be there, because we don't know exactly what the model looks like for a immortal space puppet and a Mandalorian being a father-son kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's where you get that like history of Ahsoka, where if you don't know anything about the character, like that whole line of her being like, I will not train him, like that's, you just take that as like, this is like Jedi shit, because that's what, you know, the prequels, and Yoda was like, I will not train this boy, like nobody can train this boy because he's going to murder everybody. And you should have fucking listened to Yoda when he first said it, because he was fucking right, he didn't murder everybody. But here, like, when you know the specific history of what's happening with Ahsoka and her relationship with Anakin, that she knows, she's fought Anakin at this point as Darth Vader, and she knows specifically, like, it's not just that she knows that this is a thing that can happen. She knows that specifically this is what they did to Anakin. They took him from the only family he had, and like Qui-Gon did that. Qui-Gon was, like, for a small time, Anakin's father figure, and then that father figure was killed. And Anakin was left with no family, no guidance. The only guiding figure he had was Obi-Wan, who was not old enough to guide him. And that's
basically like a fun uncle at best.
Yes, and like that's what leads Anakin down this path where he doesn't know how to control his emotions, how to use his abilities responsibly, all these things, because the Jedi Order failed him in providing him the like emotional support that he needed as a young man. And this is exactly the thing that like Ahsoka is faced with as a choice in front of her between Mando and Grogu. And I love, like, I feel like Rosario Dawson, like, gets all the weight of that history that, like, if you know that it's there, you can see it in how she delivers those lines.
You would not imagine if you didn't know that this is her first time playing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It feels like she very much just picked up where Ashley Eckstein left off.
Yeah.
I wonder if there were conversations there even, you know?
I would suspect so, yeah.
Yeah. Of just like, what did you do? What should I do? Because it's so well... You know, we were talking about this with Batman. You can see the choices being made as an actor, and they're very active. And I also love, you know, Ahsoka is better than the Jedi who trained her because she has lived longer and she knows more. And so she doesn't just do what Yoda did to Anakin and say, no, I'm not doing this. She says, okay, go here and figure this out. And the promise...
have him make the choice for himself.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the step that no one was able to take with her master. And so she's going to do it now. And of course, also as a narrative promise that our destination now is a Jedi temple. That's going to be so cool.
Yes, on Tython, which is a cool snow planet. So we're going to a cool snow planet.
Oh, I'm so
Jedi
excited.
Temple.
It's going to be great. It's so cool. And yeah, this is such a good episode, Sean.
It's such a good episode. Do we want to talk a little bit about the climactic fight scene? Like the whole action climax.
Just to say, there's one other thing I remembered, though. One, it was surreal just hearing someone name drop Yoda on this show. That was cool. But even more than that, Ludwig Göransson, for like a couple of bars, does a little bit of the John Williams Yoda theme and mixes it in perfectly with the Mandalorian stuff and then goes right back into his musical stylings. Amazing. Chills down the spine here.
Yeah, Ludwig Göransson, we I don't think we talked about him when we talked about the show last week, but like his work...
he's the secret weapon.
Yeah, his work on the score here is as phenomenal as ever, and particularly with this episode, because he both does that with the Force theme with Yoda, and then he also does it, like, repeatedly, he's building up the leitmotif of the Ahsoka theme throughout the episode, that you get little hints of it here and there. But then it fully culminates in the last 30 seconds when it's the like full triumphant version of the Ahsoka theme from Clone Wars.
I mean, I've said this before, but my question has always been, what does live action Star Wars look like if you don't have John Williams? Because John Williams is such an active presence that he also dictates your entire visual style.
Yeah.
And the answer is you have someone like Ludwig Göransson who isn't trying to be John Williams, but when he needs to, he can work it in there.
Yeah,
and
he could both work in John Williams, and I forget the name, but it's a different composer that does like phenomenal work on Clone Wars and Rebels, and he works in those themes as well. So it's like he's pulling in both his stuff and then two other composers' themes into this one episode, like seamlessly.
He's a genius. There's a reason he's got an Oscar. He's great. He should. I don't remember if he won the Emmy for The Mandalorian this year. He was, I think, up for it. He should definitely get an Emmy for scoring this show.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. Every single time we get the theme at the end. Oh my god. But yes, no, the final battle. Holy fuck.
Oh shit.
Somehow he did both Man with No Name standoff and Kurosawa style samurai fight right next to each other and intercut them.
Yes, no, it is the most Star Wars fucking action climax of all time, because it is the pure samurai space western thing that, yes, you are having your classic Clint Eastwood western showdown with Mandalorian while you're also like fucking Ahsoka's over here playing Yojimbo, basically.
Yes.
It is fucking amazing. Oh my god, because this is where you get because I feel like, because Dave Filoni directed the first episode and episode 5, the Gunslinger episode from season 1, which are both good episodes but are not the best episodes of those seasons. I feel like you can feel out Dave Filoni trying to like really get experience as being a director in live action as opposed to animation, because those are, as far as I know, the first things he ever directed in live action.
I think that's true. Yeah.
And so coming in here, this is the only episode he's directing for this full season. But like this feels like you are getting grade A Dave Filoni, like from, I mean, that we just saw, if you're a fan of Clone Wars, that you just saw with season 7 of Clone Wars. That it's like you are getting that level of an eye for Star Wars specifically. Because I mean, you get it throughout the whole episode, because you actually, I think one of like the times where it really made me like kind of sit up and pay attention was the shot at the midpoint of the episode where Ahsoka is sitting there with Grogu and with the tree overhanging them in the fucking full moon in the background while Mando's stomping in the foreground. Fucking perfect Star Wars shot. But then particularly this whole action climax where he's pulling in the reference material, the visual reference material of Star Wars, and integrating it seamlessly into a like new kind of whole visual style for this episode. It's like, this is where you're getting like the dude who directed some of the best episodes of Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah, it's incredible. And again, the mastery of that visual language where in the dual standoff. So you have Ahsoka versus the lady with
the magistrate.
With the magistrate with the
Beskar
spear, which that is... It's one of the best lightsaber fights in the whole fucking franchise.
Yeah, it's very good.
But you've got that, and then you've got the standoff with Michael Biehn. I love that.
So good.
God, he's good.
Oh my God. I've seen some people be disappointed. You get this sometimes when you have guest stars like this. It's like, oh, why didn't they give Michael Biehn more stuff? It's like, no, this is the perfect use of Michael Biehn. It's because it was also, I haven't seen him in anything in forever. Like I'm very accustomed with his stuff from like the late 70s and the 80s. And so it's like it took me forever to be like, who is this guy? Because I know I know in my bones who this man is.
Yes.
Because you can feel the weight of his experience of being like a movie star in like the way he's delivering lines and everything. But you're just giving him this small side part that he just fucking luxuriates in so beautifully. And then when his credit comes up in the credits, I'm like, oh my God, yes, it was Michael Biehn. And this, like, the weight he gives every little thing that character has, this, like, military dude who's just, like, a bodyguard for the magistrate as a foil for Mando in this episode. It's so good.
Yes. But so Sean, actually, for some of my PhD research, I just, like, 2 weeks ago, watched back-to-back Yojimbo and then Fistful of Dollars.
Uh-huh.
So this is on my mind.
Yeah.
And watching, basically, those are the reference materials for these two interlocking action scenes. But what Dave Filoni does, the same way, like, Genndy Tartakovsky is able to do,
yes.
which is not just nail the reference and like get it on a deep aesthetic level, but add to it and make it Star Wars-ified. And Filoni does it on both sides of it, where like the fighting style Ahsoka is doing is nothing like you would see in Kurosawa, but it is very much on par with like the Clone Wars animation style, but brought to live action. But the overall staging of it and everything and the use of the frame is so... It has learned the lessons of Kurosawa so completely, and then over here you've got the Leone thing going on, and it's also like one of the things it gets that I think is often left out in spaghetti western imitators is the humor of it.
Yes,
of like Clint Eastwood kind of looking down this like larger than life villain and just kind of smirking at him because he knows like this guy's got nothing, and the way they do both sides of that is phenomenal. And again, one of the stupidest internet comments I've ever seen was this week. Someone posting a screenshot from Kill Bill at the end of that with the fight with
I've seen
and people saying like that's what they were referencing, and I'm like, guys, I love Kill Bill too. It's a great movie, but like, how little intellectual curiosity do you have to think that is what Dave Filoni is referencing here, and not like Quentin Tarantino would be the first person to tell you he didn't come up with that. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
Yeah, it's very silly because especially, it's particularly the shot where Ahsoka is walking up before you have the duels going on, and she's walking up in the street where the wind is blowing and dust is blowing past her and her robe is flying in the wind, and it's like a reverse shot to the big group on the other side, and it's like close up of a dude like with his head sticking out a window, just like, this is Yojimbo, but Star Wars.
Oh yeah, I love that she's even using the poncho like Mifune does when he keeps his arms inside of it. And in that context specifically, he just never uses the armholes, the sleeves, and so the sleeves are just billowing. This doesn't have sleeves. This is a little more like the poncho Clint Eastwood has. And he doesn't mimic Mifune that much. But she really does it.
Yeah, and that's very much an Ahsoka thing, the Ahsoka poncho, which I appreciate that they kept the tradition alive here.
When does she get that in? Is that a Rebels thing?
I think that just starts becoming a thing that whenever she's like in a snow planet or something, she always has like a poncho on.
It's great. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, cinematically, it is just impeccable. It is so good. And because I agree. I mean, Dave Filoni's episodes last season were very good. And of course, he directed the first episode, so he set the visual language for the whole show. But he was let loose here, it feels like. And it also feels like he's learned
he's learned how to translate some of those skills fully into live action. Because it's just the framing, everything's so perfect, the pacing of it.
I mean, how crazy is it to think after all the work he's done, this is the first time he's gotten to direct a live action lightsaber duel?
Yeah, right? Mm-hmm.
And he did it. Oh, and it's not technically a lightsaber duel because the other person doesn't have one, but doing it versus this Beskar spear is so cool. And, like, I've never seen anything like that. It's such a cool idea.
It's so cool. It's one of those things where it's like the whole, like, script of the episode is so tight where you set up the concept in the first encounter with... I mean, because that's the work that the fight between Mando and Ahsoka does earlier in the script is it establishes for the audience clearly visually that the lightsaber can't pierce through Beskar, so you can have this fight. That then sets up for the fucking finale when fucking Mando's gonna have his fucking Beskar spear and fight Giancarlo Esposito, who's got the Darksaber, and it's gonna be sick as fuck.
I know. The whole episode, I'm like, please let him have the Beskar spear. Please. And I know they're gonna, like, I knew, but there was some part of my lizard brain that was like, but what if he doesn't get the Beskar spear? I need him to get the Beskar spear, and then I need to buy one to put in my house.
Yes. Right next to my Darksaber. Yeah.
Oh, I know. It's so, oh my God. Yeah, don't tease me with that, Sean. I can't wait 3 weeks for that.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's so good.
But I think, like, in many ways, I think the best moment, my favorite moment of the episode, even like ignoring all the fucking Ahsoka stuff, the end of the duel with Mando and Michael Biehn, it's just the most pure Western. It's so good of them standing there listening while these two women who are way cooler and better than they are have this sick-ass fucking samurai fight. And they're just standing there, and Michael Bihn's like really listening hard.
Oh, the sound design is so good.
So good. And then he finally hears like the spear drop and is like, oh, looks like you won. And then he like makes this big show of slowly putting the like laser shotgun down, which I think is the first time we've ever had a laser shotgun in live action Star Wars. It's been a thing of the video games forever. It's nice to have a laser shotgun in Star Wars.
I've used it in Battlefront many times.
And he slowly puts it down in the fucking shot to Mando's hand on the pistol, and the shotgun goes on the ground. Mando slowly takes the hand away. Michael B gets this big fucking grin on his face, goes for his blaster, and Mando just pops him immediately and does this cool little sheath of the pistol. And then the fucking droid comes in, he spins around and shoots it in the head. It's just... It's that thing where you get lots of times people trying to imitate what certain genres do, particularly genres like samurai and western that are, for like all purposes, mostly dead at this point. Like you get the occasional reference for them, but they're mostly gone. Certainly not what they used to be. You get people that try to imitate it. But this is not like an imitation. It's like an ownership of the way that those kinds of sequences are constructed, because it felt as good as watching the big duel at the end of a Fistful of Dollars or For a Few Dollars More or Once Upon a Time in the West, any great Leone spaghetti western. It had that same quality of, as you say, the humor, like the irony that is there, like on full display for the audience. Like it just loves it so much.
Well, I mean, narratively, like on the scripting level, that Michael Biehn does not need to do this. Yeah. Mando would let him go. Mando does not kill unnecessarily. He would be totally fine letting this guy walk out of there. That guy has nothing to prove. He has nothing to earn. It is just, I kind of want to shoot this big shiny dude, and he tries it, and that is all over the Leone stuff. Who everyone knows as soon as they meet Clint Eastwood, they're not going to beat this guy. Which is also it's a Yojimbo thing too, and it's just like, but they're stupid and they do it anyway because they're dumb men, and like, it's just, it gets that. You know, the other thing it fucking gets, the sound on Mando's glove as he's like stretching his hand around the pistol, and just that like leather sound.
Yeah,
it's
leather
just
creaking
down to the smallest details. This episode is such a joy.
It's so... I mean, I literally watched it 2 times in a row. Like, I watched it and I was like, I just have to watch this episode again because it is that thing where, like, we have to stress, like, it's not just the Ahsoka stuff and the Star Wars stuff that's so good. It's just, if all of that was taken out and this was a generic Jedi character or whatever, it still would be one of, if not the best episode of the whole show.
Yeah.
It is so much fun to watch.
You know, this season, episodes have ranged from basically the 30 minutes we would get last year to 55 minutes for the premiere this year. And I really love that, like, one, they have no standard set time, because for some reason most streaming shows still do, even though they don't need to. They all run 60 fucking minutes and none of them need to. And so this show, like, this one is like a 45-minute episode.
Yeah, it's 47 minutes.
Yeah, and it earns it. It's and not every episode is 47 minutes, so you can kind of trust when you see the time is up. You're like, okay, I trust them because they don't do this every week. Whereas there's a lot of streaming shows I watch where I'm like, oh, another 60-minute episode. Oh, this one's 90 minutes. I'm sure they needed that time.
Yeah, it's like, it's just because, you know, just coincidentally, every time it's a pilot episode and every time it's a finale, it just has to be a 90-minute episode. It just works out that way every time.
Yeah, no. But this show really, it earns the time when it honors your time.
Yeah.
And then that makes you want to honor its time when it gives you a 45-minute episode or something.
And it's just like every single minute is used to its utmost purpose. And it's just...
in a very animation style. Like, animation does not have the luxury of wasting time because time is money.
Yeah.
And Mandalorian feels like a very... like a Tartakovsky thing also. Like,
yes. Yeah.
Like, good God, there's so much Genndy Tartakovsky in this show.
Absolutely.
Well, in all Star Wars animated media, because he kind of
he was the one who invented how do you do Star Wars in animation for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, look, we will be talking much more about The Mandalorian. It might as well be a weekly thing from this point on. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, our original plan was like, maybe we'll talk about it next week. Maybe we'll wait until the season was done. And then as soon as I saw this episode, I'm like, there's no way we're not just talking about this next episode. Like, even if for some reason we could do Batman, we could just do an entire episode on this one episode of Mandalorian.
All right. Well, I'm not sure what we're going to be talking about next week. There's a lot to come in December because we have Cyberpunk 2077. We have another Batman episode to do. We're going to try to do one more Weekly Suit Gundam this year on Gundam Seed Destiny.
I really need to get around to watching more Seed Destiny.
And at some point, I think at this point, we're probably going to wait until end of December, early January for top 10 lists, but we will be doing that. But gaming is pushing to the very end of the year this year because of Cyberpunk. So there's a lot to come. We have a busy month ahead, and I am excited for all of it.
And the thing I'm most excited about is I just need to watch Mandalorian fight fucking Giancarlo Esposito with that fucking spear.